Hello everyone, and welcome back to Little Nightmare. I'm Michael, and before we begin, I'd like to ask for a little support. Please subscribe, leave a like, and if you do, let me know in the comments where in the world you're listening from. These may seem like small gestures, but they're essential for helping the channel grow and allowing me to keep bringing you these stories every night. Now, lower the volume just a bit, get comfortable, turn off the lights, and let's dive together into tonight's first story. Story 1. It begins as all things do for me now, with a sound. A single metronomic drip of water falling from a cracked tile in the ceiling of my Parisian atelier onto the stone floor. In the profound silence that is my constant companion, that drip is a detonation. It is the ticking of a clock in a room where time has died. I count the spaces between each drop, a hollow percussion against the marble, and it is the only proof I have that the world outside this stillness has not simply ceased to be. I am Anders, and I am telling you this not as a confession, for I feel no guilt, but as a map of a territory you can never visit. Listen closely. The story is unsettling, but you are safe while you listen. You are, after all, only reading words on a page. I am far away, in the quiet, listening to the drip. My mortal life was a beautiful gilded cage. I was the youngest son of an American industrial dynasty, a family so wealthy we had forgotten the source of our fortune, knowing only the weight of its expectations. My world was one of tailored suits, debutante balls, and a future preordained to be significant and utterly bland. I raged against it with the only weapons I had: paint, poetry, and a spectacular talent for self-destruction. I lived in a blur of absinthe and opium in the lower arrondissements, a darling of the avant-garde, a scandal in the society pages. I was searching for something raw, something true, something that would crack the porcelain veneer of existence and show me the bloody machinery beneath. I found it, or rather it found me, on a night thick with river fog. His name was Clark. He was not old, not in the way you might think. He possessed an agelessness that was less about preserved youth and more about a profound stillness, as if he were a mountain that had witnessed epochs. He found me in a den off the Rue Morgue, my head lolling against a velvet divan, my fingers stained with ink and cheap wine. He did not speak of immortality or power. He spoke of sight. "You paint the world as it is presented," he said, his voice a low cello note that vibrated in my bones. "I can show you the world as it is, the architecture of shadow, the music of blood." He was a collector, not of objects, but of perspectives. He saw in me a specific kind of hunger, a beautiful defiance that he found delicious. He did not force it upon me. He offered it like a curator offering a key to a forbidden wing of a museum. The choice was mine. I took it without hesitation. The transformation was not a bite in a shadowy alley, but a ceremony in his sunless apartment, a room that smelled of dust, old leather, and ozone. It was a symphony of agony, a burning away of everything soft and human. I felt my own biology rebel and then rewrite itself, cell by screaming cell. When it was over, I was not a monster. I was a new instrument, freshly tuned to a darker frequency. The power was, as he promised, absolute. Strength that could crumple steel, senses that could hear a lover's whisper from a mile away, or the frantic skittering of a mouse's heart in the walls. But the greatest gift was the sight. I could see the life shining in mortals, a shimmering, warm aura that pulsed with every heartbeat. It was beautiful. It was intoxicating. It was food. Clark's first rule was secrecy. "We are the quiet guests at the feast of humanity," he told me. "We do not startle the cattle." I laughed in his face. Secrecy was the cage I had just escaped. Why possess such glorious power only to hide it in the shadows? I would be a new kind of vampire, one who walked in the light of notoriety. I used my family's money and my newfound talents to cultivate a legend. I became the phantom of the Parisian art scene, a reclusive genius whose paintings were said to be so vivid they pulsed with a strange life. I cultivated a circle of companions, beautiful lost souls I thought worthy of the gift. Elara, a sculptor whose hands could make stone weep. Julian, a composer chasing a chord that did not exist. I gave it to them. Our little immortal circle. A constellation of dark stars burning in the Parisian night. And then there was Isabel, a mortal, a painter of such sublime, fragile talent that her life force burned, not with the common heat of a furnace, but with the cool blue flame of a welder's torch. I did not want to consume her. I wanted to possess her light, to have it illuminate my eternal night. I courted her not with threats, but with wonders. I showed her the city from the spires of Notre Dame, leaping with her in my arms, the wind a silent river beneath us. I showed her the colors that only I could see. I loved her with a desperation that was entirely, pitifully human. This is where the story curdles. This is where the omens began to accumulate, like storm clouds on a horizon only I could see. My public fame attracted attention, but not the kind I expected. It was not the pitchfork-wielding mob of the stories. It was a quieter, colder attention. I began to feel watched, not by one set of eyes, but by many. A man in a gray suit would be standing across the street every evening, never moving, never blinking. A woman with eyes the color of a winter sky would be at every one of my gallery showings, her gaze a physical weight. They were not human. I could feel the same cold stillness in them that I felt in Clark, but older, far older. Clark came to me then, his ageless face etched with a fear I did not know he could possess. "You have broken the first and only law, Anders," he whispered, the cello note in his voice now strained. "You have drawn the gaze of the custodians. They are not like us. They are the first, the silent guardians. They do not see us as a flawed experiment, a dangerous mutation. And when an experiment becomes a risk to the integrity of the whole, it is terminated." I was arrogant. I was a king in my own court. I told him I would not hide. I would face them. I would show them that we were not a flaw, but an evolution. The revelation came on the night I decided to grant Isabel the gift, to make her mine forever. I brought her to my atelier, the room with the dripping water. The moon was full, a great silver coin in the sky. I was ready to begin the ceremony, my thirst a roaring in my ears, my love a fever in my dead heart. And then they were there, the custodians. They did not break down the door. They were simply present, 3 of them, standing in the shadows of my own home. The air grew thick and cold, and the drip of water slowed, each drop now falling with the leaden finality of a tombstone settling. The one in the center, the man in the gray suit, spoke. His voice was not a sound, but an absence of sound, a void that sucked the warmth from the room. "You have misunderstood your nature, child. You believe you are a predator. You are a custodian yourself of a sort, a gardener." He stepped forward, and in his hands was not a weapon, but a book, bound in a leather that seemed to be made of petrified skin. He opened it. The pages were not paper, but a shifting, membranous material, and on them I did not see text. I saw the truth. It was not a curse. It was not a disease. It was a symbiosis, an ancient, desperate pact. Millennia ago, something came to this world. Not a demon, not a god, but something from the spaces between stars. A formless, silent entity that fed on consciousness, on soul. It was a psychic parasite of cosmic scale. The first humans to encounter it, the custodians, found a way to bind it. They could not destroy it, so they created a vessel for it. They engineered a new biology, a race of beings who would host a fragment of the entity. We, the vampires, are that vessel. Our thirst is not for blood, but for the psychic energy, the soul stuff, that the blood carries. We are the filter, the necessary sin. We consume the life force of mortals. We take the vibrant, chaotic energy, and the quiet, dormant part of that energy, the part the entity craves, is siphoned through us, through some unknowable quantum channel, to feed the slumbering horror at the center of the earth, to keep it sated, to keep it dormant. Our immortality, our power, is the payment for this service. We are the keepers of the prison, and our feeding is the lock on the door. My defiance, my very existence in the light, was a tremor in that lock. My love for Isabel, a pure, selfless mortal love, was an anomaly the system could not tolerate. A vampire who loves, who creates, who seeks meaning beyond the hunger, is a broken filter. I was a danger to the entire world. The climax was not a battle. It was a sentencing. The custodian looked at Isabel, who was frozen in terror, a perfect statue of fear. He looked at me. The experiment is compromised. The variable must be removed. I moved faster than I had ever moved, a blur of rage and protective instinct. I was upon him in a microsecond, and I simply stopped. My body locked in place. It was not magic. It was a fundamental command. A switch flipped in the core of my being. I was a puppet, and they held the strings that were woven into me at a subatomic level. You see, the custodian said, his void voice calm, you are not a king, you are a tool. And a tool that fails its purpose is discarded. He did not kill me. That would be a release. He showed me the true depth of my cage. He turned me to face Isabel, and he forced the hunger upon me. Not the gentle, controlled thirst I knew, but the raw, screaming biological imperative of the entity within. I was a conduit, wide open. I fell upon her. There was no art in it, no love, no ceremony. It was a brutal, messy consumption. I felt her light, her beautiful, cool blue flame rush into me, and then I felt it being pulled away, down through me, into the earth, a sacrifice to the sleeping god below. I was left holding her empty shell, her eyes wide with a betrayal so complete it had etched itself onto her face in the moment of her death. They left me there. They had no need to do more. I was punished. I am punished still. Now, I sit in my Elliot. The drip of water is the only sound. Clark and my companions are gone, erased by the custodians. I am alone. I am the last of my line. I paint, but the colors are gray now. I can no longer see the auras, the music of life. I am a filter that has been shut off. I am immortal, but I am starved, forever tasting the ash of Isabel's soul on a tongue that can never be cleansed. This is the true horror. Not the power, not the thirst, but the understanding of your own function in a universe that is utterly indifferent to your suffering. We are not damned. We are janitors. We are the silent, weeping guardians of a nightmare. We must continually feed, lest it wake and devour the world. My rebellion was a child's tantrum in a house built on a fault line. So I listened to the drip. It is the sound of my eternity. It is the sound of the lock, holding. I am Anders, the rebellious aristocrat, the vampire who wanted meaning. And I found it. I am a warning. A lesson. A. The voice fades here, between one word and the next. The sentence left to hang in the silent air. A thought forever a monument to my own hubris. The story is not finished, you see. It never will be. It simply continues, a wheel turning in the dark, and I am strapped to its rim. I had tried to end it, of course. In the first century after they left me here, I attempted every method I could conceive. Sunlight, which I had once walked in with such defiance, now only warms my skin like a pleasant afternoon. It does not burn. Fire, which I thrust my hands into, left the flesh blackened and seared, but within a day it was whole again. The memory of the pain, the only scar. A wooden stake, driven by my own hand with all my strength into my chest, was merely an inconvenience. A piece of dead matter, my body slowly pushed out over the course of a week, healing the wound behind it. I'm a tool built to last. They have ensured I cannot break myself. My atelier is my world. The door is not locked. I have walked out into Paris many times over the decades. The city changes. The gas lamps gave way to electric lights, the horse-drawn carriages to roaring automobiles, the bustles and top hats to jeans and t-shirts. The noise is a physical assault, a cacophony of engines and music, and 1,000 overlapping conversations. But to my muted senses, it is a dull roar, a fog of meaningless sound. I cannot hear the individual heartbeats anymore. I cannot see the shimmering auras. The world is a gray, washed-out photograph, a silent movie where everyone is an extra. I watch them, the mortals. I sit on a bench in the Jardin du Luxembourg, and I watch them live. A young couple sharing a kiss, their lives a brief, bright flare I can no longer perceive. An old man feeding the pigeons, his time running out like sand through an hourglass. I feel nothing but a hollow, echoing ache. I am a ghost haunting the living, unable to touch them, to taste their light, to even properly perceive their vibrancy. I am a camera with the lens cap permanently on. Sometimes I see one of them, a custodian. They do not age. The man in the gray suit might be standing by the Seine, looking at the water, his suit cut in a style that is now a century out of date, yet no one notices. The woman with the wintry eyes might be sitting in a cafe, stirring a cup of coffee she will never drink. They are my wardens. They are a reminder that my sentence is being carried out in perpetuity. They ensure I do not try to create a new circle, to find a new Isabel. They ensure I remain alone. I have taken to writing this account, over and over, on reams of paper that pile up in the corner of the atelier. I write it in my own blood, for I have nothing else to use. And it is a substance I have in endless, useless supply. The words dry to a rusty brown. It is not a confession. It is a record, a testament to the truth of this wretched arrangement. Perhaps one day, someone will find these pages. Perhaps a mortal, brave or foolish, will break into this silent tomb and read them. They will think it a work of fiction, a grand and terrible fantasy. They will not believe. And that is the final, perfect cruelty. The truth is too monstrous to be accepted. It is designed that way. The drip continues. Drip, dotty. I am a filter. Shut off. Drip, die. I am a lock, holding. Drip, dight. Einem Enders. And this is not a story. It is a function, a process. I am a line of code in the grand, terrible software of existence, written to perform a single grim task, and now left running in an endless loop after that task was taken from me. I have come to understand the silence is not merely an absence of sound. It is a presence. It is the silence of the entity below, sated and dreaming. My own stillness is a pale reflection of its cosmic slumber. In my worst moments, I fancy I can feel it. A vast, patient weight at the center of everything, and I am a single screaming nerve ending connected directly to its unimaginable mind. Last night, something changed. The drip stopped. For the first time in 100 years, the metronomic detonation ceased. The silence that followed was different. It was not my silence, the hollow emptiness of my prison. This was a listening silence, a waiting one. I sat in the perfect stillness, my entire being focused on the cracked tile, waiting for the next drop that did not come. And then I felt it. Not a sound, but a tremor. A shiver that ran not through the stone floor, but through the fabric of my own being. It was a flicker, a ghost of a sensation I had not felt in an eternity. For a single heart-stopping second I saw it. A faint, golden shimmer around my own hand as I raised it in the dark. The sight was gone as quickly as it came, leaving a searing afterimage on my soul. The drip began again, slower now, more deliberate, and with it, a new sound. So faint I thought I was imagining it. A whisper, not in the room, but in the foundations of the world. It was not the void voice of the custodians. This was something else, something older and hungrier. It was a single word, understood not with my ears, but with the very core of the parasite I host. More, more. The lock is not just holding, it is straining. And I, the discarded tool, the broken filter, am the only one who can hear it. The word hung in the air, a stain on the silence. More. It was not a request. It was a demand, an imperative that bypassed my mind and spoke directly to the hollow engine of my being. The hunger, a dead thing in my chest for a century, gave a single, agonizing throb. It was not the thirst I remembered, that complex symphony of desire and art. This was the raw, undifferentiated need of the thing in the dark, and it was using my body, my senses, as its microphone. I looked at my hands, willing the golden shimmer to return. Nothing, nothing. The world was still gray and muffled, but the whisper was not. It was a low, pervasive pressure, a subaudible hum that vibrated in the marrow of my bones. The custodians had shut me down, but they had not severed the connection. They could not. The connection was what I was. They had only muted my end of it. Now, something was amplifying the signal from the other side. I stood, my movements stiff from decades of stillness. The piles of blood-scribed pages rustled like dry leaves as I passed. I went to the door, the one I had not opened in years. The handle was cold in my grasp. I stepped out into the Parisian night. The city was a blur of neon and noise, but I was not seeing it, not hearing it. I was following a new sense, a compass needle spinning in my soul, pulled by the whisper. It led me away from the bright boulevards, down into the older, quieter streets towards the river. The hum grew stronger, a tectonic grinding felt only by me. I saw a custodian then. The woman with the wintry eyes standing under a lamppost on the Quai de la Tournelle. She was not looking at the water. She was looking at me, her expression for the first time, not one of cold observation, but of sharp, unmistakable alarm. She took a step toward me, and I felt the familiar pressure, the command to stop, to be still. It did not work. The whisper in my core swelled, a wave of static that washed over her silent command. I felt it break against me, useless. Her eyes widened, a flicker of something like fear in their frozen depths. I turned away from her and kept walking. I was no longer their obedient tool. I was being repurposed. The needle led me to a grate in a shadowed alley behind the Musée de Cluny, an old drain that smelled of damp stone and decay. The whisper was a roar now, a deafening silence that screamed more. I ripped the grate from its moorings, the iron screaming in protest, and dropped into the darkness below. I landed in a tunnel, part of the ancient labyrinth, that crisscrosses the city's underbelly. The air was thick and cold. The whisper was not a sound here, but a physical force, a wind that pulled me forward. I moved through the darkness, my useless eyes seeing nothing, my new sense guiding me unerringly. I could feel the weight of the city above me, the millions of lives, their collective soul stuff, a vast, unseen ocean. And below, a vacuum, an infinite thirst. The tunnel opened into a cavern so vast its ceiling was lost in gloom. This was not a place built by human hands. The walls were of a smooth black stone that seemed to swallow the light. And in the center of the cavern I saw them, the custodians, dozens of them, standing in a wide circle. They were not looking at me. Their attention was fixed on the center of their formation, where the air shimmered like heat haze over a desert. The man in the gray suit was there, his hands raised, his void voice a low, constant chant that I could feel rather than hear, a counter-melody to the demanding whisper. They were not my jailers anymore. They were mechanics, desperately trying to contain a reactor breach, and I was the spark that had jumped the gap. They felt my presence. As one, their heads turned. The collective weight of their will fell upon me, a mountain of silent command meant to crush me into nothingness. Stop. Cease. Be still. The entity within me answered. The whisper became a shriek. More. I took a step forward. Then, another. Their power slid off me, unable to gain purchase on a will that was no longer my own. I was a vessel, and the master I served was far older, far hungrier than they were. The man in the gray suit met my gaze. For the first time, I saw not condemnation or fear in his eyes, but a profound cosmic resignation. He knew. Their quiet, orderly maintenance had failed. The filter was broken. The lock was breaking. I walked through their circle, past their frozen, desperate forms, to the shimmering air at the center. The hum was of physical pain now, a vibration that threatened to shake me apart. I looked down. There was no monster, no slumbering beast. There was only a fissure in the black rock, a crack from which no light emerged, only a profound gravitational hunger. It was a mouth, a throat, an emptiness that wanted to be filled. The whisper stopped. There was only the pull. I understood my final purpose. I was not a warning. I was a door. My rebellion, my love, my pain. It had all been a flaw, a stress fracture that had now split wide open. I was the variable that had broken the experiment. I turned my face upwards, towards the distant, unseen city, towards the lives I could no longer perceive. I opened my mouth, but it was not my voice that emerged. It was the voice of the void, the final deafening command that erupted from me. A wave of pure need that would travel through stone and soil, through flesh and bone, to every living thing above. Feed me. The word was not a sound. It was a reality. It erupted from the fissure through me, a wave of absolute negation that was also a command. It did not travel through the air, but through the substance of the world itself, a seismic shock of need. In the cavern, the custodians did not scream. They simply dissolved. Their forms unwove like thread, their ancient, collected energies siphoned away in an instant, pulled into the fissure. The man in the gray suit was the last to go, his eyes on mine, his expression not of anger, but of a weary, final understanding. Then he was gone, a wisp of dust motes in the non-light. The command did not stop there. It went up. In the streets of Paris, the change was instantaneous and silent. A man laughing on his mobile phone suddenly paused, his smile vanishing. His eyes went blank, not with emptiness, but with a sudden, profound absence. He did not fall. He stood, a statue, as the vibrant, chaotic energy that was his life, his soul, was pulled from him, a silent scream torn from his body and drawn down into the earth. A woman watering her flowers on a balcony simply stilled, the watering can tipping from her grasp, the water pattering to the floor, unnoticed. A child chasing a pigeon froze mid-step, a perfect sculpture of interrupted motion. All across the city, the music stopped. The auras I had been unable to see for a century were being extinguished, not one by one, but all at once, a galaxy of stars winking out simultaneously. The psychic energy of millions, the collective soul stuff of a metropolis, was being harvested. I could feel it now, a torrent of stolen light flooding into the fissure, a river of life pouring into a bottomless sea. The entity was not just sated, it was awakening, and I was the conduit. The pain was beyond anything I had ever known. It was not a physical pain, but the agony of a universe being unmade through me. I felt every life as it was extinguished, not as an individual tragedy, but as a note in a colossal, dissonant chord of consumption. I was the focal point, the open wound in reality through which the world was bleeding out. The gray film over my senses shattered, but I did not see the beautiful, shimmering auras of before. I saw the truth of the process. I saw the life force as a raw, screaming energy, a brilliant and terrible light that was being torn from its mortal coil and funneled into the infinite dark below. I saw the essence of Isabel in that torrent, not as a memory, but as a distinct flavor of light, consumed and lost all over again. This was the true purpose of my kind. We were not gentle filters. We were lightning rods. We were meant to draw this energy in controlled, manageable sips, to quiet the hunger with a constant, gentle drip. My rebellion had not just broken the law. It had ripped the entire mechanism from the door. The custodians were the regulators, and with them gone, the system was overloading. The entity was drinking directly from the source, and I was the straw. The fissure began to widen. The black rock at its edges groaned and cracked, splintering like glass. The emptiness within was no longer passive. It was becoming something. A shape was beginning to form in the void, a geometry that hurt the mind to perceive, a physical manifestation of infinite appetite. The humming had become a deafening, triumphant roar that was the only sound left in the world. I looked down at my own hands. They were glowing, not with a golden light, but with the same terrible stolen energy that was flowing through me. I was not just a conduit. I was becoming a part of it. My immortality, my cursed existence, was the anchor point. I would live forever, powering this awakening, forced to witness the endless consumption of every living thing that would ever be. This was my meaning. This was the end of my story. Not a quiet, gray eternity of regret, but an active, screaming forever of complicity. I was Anders, the vampire who sought purpose, and I had found it. I was the engine of the end of the world, the first and last true servant of the hunger. The fissure yawned wide, and the darkness reached for me. It did not take me in an embrace. It etched itself onto me. The screaming torrent of life became the very fabric of my being. My skin hardened into a lattice of obsidian, coursing with the captured light of 1,000,000 souls. My eyes became twin pools of the same absolute void that had birthed the command. I was no longer a man or a vampire. I was a monument of living hunger, a standing stone at the gate of a new and terrible genesis. I took a step. The cavern floor did not shake. It simply ceased to exist where my foot fell, the stone unmade into nothingness, adding its substance to the growing void. I was walking, but I was not moving myself. The hunger moved me. It was exploring its new vessel, testing its limits. I was a brushstroke of annihilation painting over the canvas of the world. I rose through the layers of stone as if they were smoke. I emerged not in the alley behind the museum, but in the middle of the Rue Saint-Jacques. The silence was absolute. The cars were frozen in the streets, their engines dead. The people were statues, their faces locked in a final, mundane moment, their inner light utterly gone. Paris was a city of exquisite corpses. And then the fissure in the cavern below was no longer just below. It was everywhere. Thin, black cracks began to appear in the air itself, spider webbing through reality. They sang with the same deafening hum, a vibration that was slowly unraveling the laws of physics. A double-decker bus was neatly sheared in half by a crack that manifested through it. The severed ends not crumpled metal, but perfect, smooth nothingness. I walked through the still life of the apocalypse. This was the sating. This was the more. It was not enough to consume the life force. It was consuming matter, time, memory itself. The world was being simplified, reduced to its most basic component, a fuel for an awakening god, a flicker of resistance, a single golden spark in the gray. It was a custodian, the woman with the wintry eyes, reconstituted from the dust motes of her dissolution. She stood on the Pont Neuf, her form flickering, unstable. She was a ghost of a ghost, a last echo of the system that had failed. She raised a hand, not in command, but in a plea, a final, desperate act of will to mend the unmendable. The hunger within me reacted with instinctive, overwhelming force. A tendril of pure void lashed out from the cracks around me. Not from me, but through me. It touched her, and her flickering form was not erased, but drawn out into an infinitely long thread of light, before being sucked back into the fissure that was now the sky. Her silent scream was the first sound I had heard since my own command, a brief, sharp note of protest that was instantly swallowed. Her destruction completed the circuit. The last regulator was gone. The process accelerated. The gray of the dead city began to bleed of its color, not to black, but to a blinding, painful white. Then the white itself began to fray at the edges, peeling back like old wallpaper to reveal the roaring, chaotic static of the void beneath. Reality was a thin skin, and I was the infection burning through it. I felt a pull, not from below, but from ahead. The entity was no longer a distant presence in a crack. It was coalescing, and it was using my form as its blueprint. My body was the scaffold upon which it was building its avatar in this reality. I was being written over. My history, my pain, my love for Isabel, all being converted into a language of pure consumption. I was a story it was telling itself to understand what it was to have a self. I reached the Seine. The water was not water anymore. It was a solid, glossy black plain, reflecting a sky that was no longer there. I looked down at my reflection. I saw a man-shaped hole in the world, edged with a corona of dying stars. Where my face should have been, there was only the endless, hungry dark. The last fragment of who I was, the consciousness that had been Anders, was now a tiny, screaming prisoner in the heart of a collapsing universe. This was the lesson. This was the warning. I had wanted meaning, and I had become the instrument of ultimate meaninglessness. The hunger was not a thing to be sated. It was a law of existence, and I was its final, terrible proof. The white frayed completely. The static roared. The last thing I perceived was not a sight or a sound, but a single definitive concept that filled the infinite void, a concept that was both my name and my epitaph. Consumption. The concept was not a thought. It was a new law of physics, and I was its first and only subject. The roaring static did not fade. It solidified. The blinding white that was the death of color became a prison of pure sensation, a canvas upon which nothing would ever be painted again. I was the brush, but there was no more paint. The hunger had consumed everything, including itself. There was no time, so I do not know how long I existed in that final, perfect state of negation. I was a monument in a universe that had been erased. I was the only thing that was, and I was nothing. Then, a flaw. A single, impossible point of pressure against the absolute. It was not light. It was not sound. It was a persistence, a stubbornness. It was the memory of a memory, the ghost of a woman's laugh, echoing in a cathedral of silence. Isabel Doit. Her name was not a word. It was a singularity, a point of infinite density in the void. The hunger had consumed her life, her soul, her essence, but it had not consumed the shape she had left on me. My love for her was not an energy to be siphoned. It was a scar, and a scar is not a thing that is. It is a record of a thing that was. It is a story. The entity, this new god of consumption, had used my form, my history, as its blueprint. It had written itself over my story, but it had failed to erase the oldest, deepest part of the narrative. It had failed to erase the scar. The pressure grew. The singularity of her memory began to exert a gravitational pull on the nothingness around it. It started to draw in the only thing left, me. I felt myself being pulled back into a shape I had forgotten. The obsidian lattice of my skin began to remember flesh. The twin pools of void in my skull began to remember sight. The screaming silence began to remember sound. It was not a rebirth. It was a reconstruction from a single, salvaged blueprint. The scar was rebuilding the body around itself. The blinding white shattered like glass. I was on my hands and knees on cold, wet cobblestones. The air was thick with the smell of rain and the river. I was gasping, drawing breath into lungs that had no need for air, a reflex of a body remembering itself. I looked up. Paris was there. The city was whole. Cars moved, their tires hissing on the damp streets. A couple argued softly on a corner, their auras a tangled mess of orange frustration and blue concern. A waiter was closing the awning of a cafe, his life force a steady, tired ember. The world was drenched in the shimmering, beautiful, chaotic tapestry of life. It was as it had been before I had ever heard the whisper, before I had ever stepped into the cavern. I looked at my hands. They were my own, pale, long-fingered, solid. There was no golden light, but there was no void blackness either. I was just me. Anders died. The broken filter. I pushed myself to my feet, my body trembling with the echo of an apocalypse that had never happened. Or had it? The memory was perfect, seared into me. The dissolution of the custodians, the stillness of the city, the unraveling of reality, the feeling of becoming a god of hunger. It was more real than the rain on my face. I turned slowly, searching the familiar skyline for any crack, any flaw. There was nothing. It was all here. Every single life, restored. Then I saw her. Across the street, under the awning of a closed bookstore, stood the custodian woman with the wintry eyes. She was not looking at the auras of the passers-by. She was looking directly at me. Her expression was not one of alarm or command. It was one of profound, unutterable shock, and something else. A flicker of what might have been fear. Our eyes met. In that instant, I knew. She remembered too. She remembered the end of the world. She remembered her own dissolution. She remembered my part in it. She took a single, hesitant step forward, then stopped. She raised a hand, not in a gesture of power, but almost in a question. Her lips parted as if to speak, but no sound came out. The void voice was silent. I understood. The entity had been pushed back. The lock was restored. The custodians were back at their posts. But the timeline had been reset with a critical error, a paradox. The tool remembered breaking the machine. The regulators remembered being broken by the tool. The hunger had been denied its feast. It had been forced to regurgitate reality, to put everything back exactly as it was. But you cannot unbreak a vase without the cracks showing. You cannot unlive a memory. The woman lowered her hand. The shock in her eyes hardened into a new, cold understanding. We were no longer warden and prisoner. We were fellow survivors of a catastrophe that had been erased from history. We were the only two beings in all of creation who knew how fragile the world truly was. And we both knew the same terrifying truth. The entity was still there. It was still hungry. And it now knew that I, the broken filter, was not just a door that could be opened. I was a door that could remember being open. I turned and walked away into the living, breathing, oblivious city. The rain felt clean on my skin. The shimmering auras of the people around me were a symphony I had once longed to hear again. Now, each one felt like a note balanced on the edge of a knife. I had my purpose back. It was not the one I had wanted, but it was the one I had been given. I was no longer the engine of the end. I was its living memory, and a memory can be a warning, or it can be a promise. The whisper was gone, but the echo remained, a secret vibration in the core of my being, a single word that was now mine alone to heed or to ignore. More. Story 2. The line between the waking world and the dream was a thread of silver, a seam stitched loosely through the fabric of the night. For Marina, it had always been there, a boundary as real as the peeling white paint on the windowsill of her bedroom. On one side, the solid, heavy darkness of the house, the scent of old wood and beeswax, the sound of her sisters breathing from the next room. On the other, the shimmering, liquid world of sleep, where memories could twist into grotesque shapes. But tonight, the thread was fraying. The seam was splitting. As she floated in that hypnagogic state, the weight of her quilt became the weight of damp earth. And the sigh of the wind through the pines outside became a voice, whispering a name she had not heard spoken aloud in 10 years. They lived in the house at the end of Gable Road, a tall, gaunt structure of weathered clapboard that seemed to flinch from the sun. The pines pressed in close on all sides, their branches scraping against the roof like bony fingers asking to be let in. Inside, Crystal maintained the order. She was the architect of their days, her life a meticulously drawn map with no room for terra incognita. Every morning she rose at 6:45 precisely, her bare feet meeting the cold floorboards with a soft thud that was as regular as a heartbeat. She would then walk to her sister's room, tap twice on the door, and wait for Marina's murmured response before entering to draw open the curtains. The ritual was a bulwark. It kept the chaos at bay. Marina was the older one, though she often felt like a ghost in her sister's carefully ordered world. Since the incident, a part of her had never fully returned to her body. She spent her days in the sunroom at the back of the house, her hands busy with needlepoint, creating intricate, meaningless patterns of flowers and vines, while her mind wandered the dim corridors of their shared history. She was the lookout, the sentinel who felt the shifts in the air, the subtle cracks in their reality that Crystal was too busy fortifying to notice. Their existence was a closed system, a self-sustaining ecosystem of quiet meals, silent chores, and the unspoken agreement to never, ever speak of what had happened to their parents. The townspeople in Blackwater, the small insular community a mile down the road, were happy to oblige. They saw the sisters as tragic, yes, but also touched, marked by the strange fate that had befallen their family. They left groceries on the porch every Thursday, and the mailman never lingered after dropping the mail in the box. The boundary between the house on Gable Road and the rest of the world was as stark and definite as the property line. This fragile peace was shattered by the arrival of Jaden. He came on a Thursday, the day of the groceries, as if he were just another delivery. Marina saw him first from the sunroom, a figure emerging from the wall of pines, not using the road but cutting through the woods themselves. He moved with an easy, unfamiliar gait, a duffel bag slung over his shoulder. He was young, perhaps in his early 20s, with their mother's sharp cheekbones and a smile that seemed to hold too many teeth. Crystal was in the kitchen, polishing the silverware for the third time that week, when the doorbell chimed, a sound so foreign and shrill it seemed to tear a hole in the quiet of the house. Crystal opened the door a crack, the chain lock taut. The young man on the porch smiled. "Aunt Lydia's boy," he said, his voice smooth and warm. "Jane, Mom said you could use some help around the place." Looks like she wasn't wrong. The name meant nothing to Crystal. Aunt Lydia was a phantom from a past life, a sister to their mother who had moved away before they were born. But he had their mother's eyes, that same sea glass green. It was this detail, this undeniable biological truth, that made her undo the chain. He moved in with the quiet confidence of a predator surveying new territory. He fixed the leaky faucet in the pantry. He cleared the gutters of pine needles. He brought a radio into the house and played old country songs that filled the silent rooms with a mournful, twanging energy that felt like a violation. He was helpful, charming, and utterly disruptive. He asked questions. "This is a big house for just the two of you," he remarked one evening over a silent dinner of stew and bread. "Must get lonely." "We have each other," Crystal said, her voice clipped, her eyes on her plate. Sure, Jaden said, nodding. "But family is family. Blood is blood. It's a shame what happened. Your folks, no one ever really figured it out, did they?" A silence fell, thick and heavy as a blanket of snow. Marina flinched, her fork clattering against her plate. Crystal's knuckles were white around her own utensil. "We don't talk about that," she said, her voice low and dangerous. Jaden just smiled, that easy, infuriating smile. "Of course. My mistake." The omens began to accumulate, small at first, like the first few drops of rain before a deluge. Marina started waking before dawn, convinced she heard a third set of footsteps pacing the hallway upstairs, a slow, heavy tread that was neither hers nor her sister's. The smell of their father's pipe tobacco, a sweet and spicy scent extinct for a decade, would sometimes drift through the house, lingering for a moment in a room before vanishing as if it had never been. The crows that gathered in the skeletal oak at the edge of the property watched the house with an unusual intensity, their black eyes seeming to hold a malevolent intelligence. Crystal dismissed it all. "The house settles," she would say of the footsteps. "Memory plays tricks on you." She would insist about the smell. "They're just birds, Marina." But her rituals became more frantic, more desperate. She began washing the floors with a mixture of vinegar and salt, an old folk recipe their grandmother had sworn by for keeping bad spirits away. She lined the windowsills with rowan twigs. She was building her fortifications higher, but the enemy, it seemed, was already inside the walls. The true unraveling began with the arrival of Judah. He was their father's brother, a man broken by the same tragedy that had hollowed out the sisters. He lived in a cabin deeper in the woods, a hermit who was seen in town only once or twice a year to buy supplies. He appeared on their porch one storm-lashed night, his oilskin coat dripping onto the clean floor, his face a roadmap of grief and fear. "He's here, isn't he?" Judah said, his voice a dry rasp. He didn't need to say a name. His eyes, wide and wild, went past Crystal to where Jaden stood at the foot of the stairs, smiling. "Uncle Judah," Jaden said. "A pleasure. I've heard so much about you." Judah recoiled as if struck. "You look like her," he whispered. "You have her smile." That night, with the wind howling like a chorus of the damned, Judah told them a story. He sat at the kitchen table, a glass of whiskey trembling in his hand, and spoke of things they had spent a lifetime trying to forget. He spoke of their mother, Ilara, not as the kind woman they remembered, but as someone who was fascinated by the spaces between things, the cracks in the world. She had been a student of old ways, of rituals that were older than the town itself. She believed that their property, this very land, was a thin place, a place where the boundary between our world and another was tissue paper thin. She wasn't trying to summon a demon or raise the dead, Judah whispered, the storm hissing its agreement outside. She was trying to look through. She called it the glimmer. She said it was a place of pure pattern, a beautiful, terrible order. But she didn't understand. You can't just look. Something looks back. He told them of the night their parents died. It hadn't been an accident. A random act of violence the police had never solved. Ilara, in her obsession, had succeeded. She had peeled back the skin of the world, and something had come through. Something that wore their father's face for a little while, before it shed him like a used skin and slipped back into the glimmer, sated. "It wasn't a man who did it," Judah said, his eyes hollow. "It was a thing that learned to wear a man. It tasted our world. It tasted them. And it liked it. Ilara's rituals, her protections, they were a beacon. They were an invitation." Jaden listened from the doorway, his smile gone, his face an unreadable mask. "And what happened to it?" he asked, his voice dangerously calm. "It went back," Judah said. "But a door, once opened, can never be fully closed. It leaves a resonance, a wound, and wounds attract flies." The revelation settled over the house, a shroud of absolute dread. The strange occurrences intensified. The footsteps upstairs were now accompanied by a soft, wet sound, like something dragging itself across the floor. The smell of piped tobacco was replaced by the coppery tang of blood and the sweet, cloying stench of decay. Marina in her nightmares no longer saw monsters. She saw a beautiful, intricate lattice of light, a cosmic pattern so vast and cold it threatened to unmake her mind just by witnessing it. It was the glimmer, and it was hungry. The climax came on the anniversary, the day their parents had died. A thick, silent fog had rolled in from the woods, swallowing the house whole, blurring the line between the structure and the trees, until they were all adrift in a sea of gray. Crystal's rituals had failed. Her salt lines were scattered, her rowan twigs snapped. She stood in the parlor, clutching a kitchen knife, her body trembling with a terror so profound it had become a new kind of silence. Jaden found her there. He was different now. The charming facade had melted away, revealing something ancient and patient beneath. His movements were too fluid. His eyes held a light that was not of this world. "It's not about keeping it out, Crystal," he said, his voice a symphony of whispers, as if 100 mouths were speaking just out of sync. It never was. The rituals were never a lock. They were a welcome mat, a dinner bell. Ilara understood. She offered a tribute to keep it satisfied. A life for a life, she gave it your father. But a tribute must be repeated, or the guest grows hungry again. He took a step forward, and the air in the room grew cold and thin. "I am not your cousin. I am a reminder, a bill come due." Marina emerged from the fog-shrouded hallway. She was not holding a weapon. In her hands was a piece of her needlepoint, the one she had been working on for months. It was not a pattern of flowers. It was a complex, non-Euclidean design, a spiral that hurt the eyes to look at, a map of the glimmer itself. She had been dreaming it, stitching it, channeling it. "You're wrong," she said, her voice clear and strong for the first time in years. Mother wasn't just feeding it. She was trying to understand it, to control it. She failed because she was alone. Marina looked at Jaden, at the thing wearing her cousin's skin, and she saw the pattern within him, the beautiful, terrible lattice of light. She did not try to fight it. She did not try to build a wall. Instead, she opened herself to it. She let the pattern flow into her, through her. She began to whisper, not words of banishment, but words of welcome, of invitation. A language of hums and clicks and sighs that was older than humanity. Jaden's smile finally faltered. The thing inside him recoiled, not in fear, but in confusion. It was used to prey that fought or fled. It did not understand prey that opened its arms. "The boundary isn't there to keep you out," Marina whispered, her eyes now shining with the same cold alien light as his. "It's there to keep us in, but I'm tired of being kept." She took a step toward him, and then another, her needlepoint falling to the floor. She reached out a hand and touched his chest, and she began to pull. She did not pull him toward her. She pulled the glimmer out of him and into herself. The house groaned. The fog outside pulsed with a sickly phosphorescent light. Crystal watched, paralyzed, as her sister's body seemed to become a conduit for a power that made the air itself vibrate. Jaden screamed, a raw human sound, as the thing that had worn him was stripped away, unraveling like a knot of burning thread into Marina's waiting form. Then he collapsed, a hollow shell, just a young man on the floor. Marina stood tall, her head tilted back. Her form seemed to flicker, to become insubstantial. She was both there and not there, a woman and a doorway. "Crystal," she said, and her voice was an echo from 1,000 miles away. The line was always an illusion. There is no inside or outside. There is only the pattern. It's so beautiful. I'll hold it for a while. I'll keep it from... Her voice faded between words, the sound dissolving into the hum of the silent, waiting house, leaving the last sentence unfinished. Crystal stood alone in the center of the parlor, the kitchen knife hanging useless from her hand. The thing that had been Jaden was gone, and the boy who was left lay in a crumpled heap on the floor, breathing in shallow, ragged gasps. But Marina was not gone. She was a statue of light and shadow, a human-shaped void through which Crystal could see the swirling, chaotic patterns of the glimmer. The air around her sister crackled with a silent, furious energy, and the fog outside the windows thickened, pressing against the glass like a curious animal. The house was no longer silent. It was filled with a low, pervasive hum, the sound of the world straining at its seams. The peeling white paint on the windowsill began to blister and curl, not from heat, but from the unnatural pressure of the reality Marina was now holding at bay. The pattern on the fallen needlepoint glowed with a faint, sickly luminescence, its threads twisting and writhing like worms on the floorboards. Crystal's meticulously ordered world had not just been shattered, it had been inverted. The bulwarks were gone, and the chaos was not pounding at the gates. It was standing in her parlor, wearing her sister's face. She took a hesitant step forward, her hand outstretched. "Marina?" she whispered, the name a fragile thing in the humming air. Marina's head turned slowly. Her eyes were not her own. They were vast, star-flecked pools of darkness, windows into the infinite, cold pattern she had absorbed. There was no recognition in them, only a distant, terrible curiosity. Yet, when she spoke, her voice was a strained echo of the sister Crystal knew, frayed at the edges by the cosmic static. "It's heavy," she breathed. "So heavy. But I can see the threads, Crystal. I can see how it's all woven together. Our lives, just a few tangled knots in a much larger tapestry. A floorboard creaked upstairs. Then another. The slow, heavy tread they had heard before was back, but now it was directly above them. It was no longer an echo or a memory. It was a presence, drawn to the raw, gaping wound in reality that Marina had become. The coppery smell of blood filled the air, so strong it made Crystal's stomach clench. Jaden moaned on the floor, stirring back to consciousness. His eyes fluttered open, filled with a primal, uncomprehending terror. He scrambled backward, away from Marina's flickering form, until his back hit the wall. "What did you do?" he rasped, his voice raw. "What is she?" "She's buying us time," Crystal said, the words tasting like ash in her mouth. She didn't know if they were true, but they were the only words she had. The architect in her was dead. The map was burned. All that was left was the uncharted territory of this moment. Marina took a step, her movement not quite walking, but a glide that seemed to smear her form across the room. She was focusing, Crystal realized. She was a lens, and the glimmer was the light. She was concentrating its attention on herself, pulling the leaking, hungry energy from the rest of the house and into the vessel of her own body. The footsteps upstairs paused. The oppressive weight in the air shifted, centering on the parlor. "I can't hold it forever," Marina said, her voice thinning, becoming more distant. "It wants anchors. It wants to make this place permanent. It needs blood and memory." Her star-filled eyes fixed on Jaden. "It used you. A key made of familiar blood. But you're empty now." Then her gaze shifted to Crystal, and for a fleeting second, there was a ghost of her old self there. A desperate, loving fear. "It will try to use you too. Your order, your rituals. They are a different kind of anchor, a familiar path for it to walk." Man, the truth of it crashed down on Crystal. Her entire adult life, her compulsion to clean and order and control, had not been keeping the darkness out. It had been laying a foundation for it, creating a structure of habit and place that the glimmer could use to solidify its hold on their world. She had been building a cage, and she had been the one inside it all along. The choice was upon her then, stark and immediate. She could fall back into the old pattern, the only one she knew. Try to clean this up, to put things back in their boxes, to restore the boundary even though she now knew it was a lie. Or she could do what Marina had done. She could step into the chaos. She let the knife fall from her hand. It clattered on the floor, a shockingly mundane sound. She walked toward her sister, her heart hammering against her ribs like a trapped bird. She ignored the terrified whimper from Jaden and the way the very air resisted her movement, thick as water. "I'm here," she said to Marina, her voice trembling but clear. "I'm not building any more walls." She reached out and took her sister's hand. The contact was like plunging into an icy, electric ocean. Visions, not her own, flooded her mind. The beautiful, terrifying lattice of the glimmer, the cold intelligence at its heart, the echoes of her mother's desperate voice chanting in the dark, the raw, screaming moment of her father's. It was a torrent of pattern and pain, and it threatened to scour her clean of everything that made her Crystal. But she did not let go. She held on tighter. And instead of fighting it, instead of trying to organize the chaos, she did something she had not done since she was a small child. She simply witnessed it. She let the storm rage through her without trying to name its parts or predict its path. And in that surrender, she found a different kind of order. Not her own rigid, fearful one, but the fluid, dynamic order of the pattern itself. She saw how to weave, not how to wall off. She saw how to redirect the energy, not block it. Marina's form solidified slightly, the flickering becoming less violent. A look of profound relief crossed her alien features. "Yes," she whispered. "You see it." Together, they turned their attention to the heart of the house, to the wound their mother had opened. They did not try to close it. They began, slowly, painstakingly, to stitch it into the fabric of the world around it, to weave the glimmer's chaotic light into the old wood and the dusty air, making it a part of the house's new, true reality. It was not a victory. It was a transformation. The house on Gable Road would never be safe again, but for the first time in 10 years, it was becoming whole. The work was slow and agonizing, a silent, internal negotiation with a force that had no language, only intent. Crystal felt her own mind stretching, on the verge of tearing. She was a weaver at a loom of impossible scale, her own memories and Marina's guiding hands as they took the raw, hungry energy of the glimmer and threaded it into the very beams of the house, the roots of the oak tree outside, the silent, watching stones in the garden. They were not banishing the otherness. They were domesticating it, making it a part of the home's ecosystem. The fog outside began to change. The oppressive, uniform gray swirled with hints of that same sickly, beautiful light that had pulsed in Marina's needlepoint. The crows in the oak tree cawed, not in alarm, but in what sounded like recognition, their feathers glistening with an oily, iridescent sheen. The house itself seemed to breathe a sigh, the groaning timbers settling into a new, permanent alignment. The air still hummed, but the pitch was lower now. A foundational note rather than a scream of protest. When it was done, or as done as it could be, the connection between the sisters broke. Crystal stumbled back, gasping, her senses returning to her with a jolt. The world was too bright, too loud, too real. She looked at her hands, half expecting to see them glowing, but they were just her hands, calloused and familiar. Marina stood before her, fully substantial once more, but she was changed. Her eyes, while their original soft brown now held a depth that had not been there before, a flicker of ancient patterned light in their depths when the light hit them just so. She looked tired, but also for the first time in a decade, completely present. "It's part of the house now," Marina said, her voice her own, though it carried a new, quiet authority. "And the house is part of it. We can't ever leave, Crystal. Not for long. We are the anchors, the stewards." On the floor, Jaden stirred again. He pushed himself up, his eyes wide with a trauma too fresh to name. He looked from Crystal to Marina, and then around the parlor. The room was the same, yet profoundly different. The light from the window fell in patterns that were subtly wrong, creating angles that should not have existed. The dust motes danced in the air not randomly, but in intricate repeating spirals. What happens to me?" he asked, his voice small. Marina turned her calm, deep gaze on him. "You are free to go," she said. "The thing that used you is woven into the foundation now. It has no more use for you. But you will remember, and you will never speak of this. The story of this place is ours to tell, or not to tell." Jaden nodded slowly, a sob catching in his throat. He was a man who had been a key, and then a lock, and was now just a discarded tool. He scrambled to his feet, and without another word, fled out the front door and into the transformed fog. Crystal watched him go, then looked back at her sister. The silence that descended was different from any that had come before. It was not the silence of dread, or of things left unsaid. It was the silence of a new equilibrium, fragile and hard won. The house was quiet, but it was a living quiet, filled with the potential of the pattern they now held within its walls, and within themselves. They were not safe, but they were, finally, home. The days that followed were a lesson in a new kind of normal. Crystal would find herself staring at a wall, only to realize the faded floral pattern was slowly and perceptibly rearranging itself into a more pleasing, non-Euclidean design. The old grandfather clock in the hall no longer told time, but instead ticked in a rhythm that matched the slow, deep heartbeat of the house. Marina would sometimes stand in the garden for hours, her hands held out, palms up, as if listening to a conversation on the wind. They learned the rules of their new existence by breaking them. Crystal tried to scrub the strange new patterns from the wallpaper, only to watch them reappear behind her, brighter and more complex. Marina attempted to walk to the edge of the property line, but a deep, psychic nausea forced her back long before she reached the rusted iron gate. The house needed them, and they needed it. The bond was symbiotic, a tether of mutual survival. Weeks later, a police officer came to the door, following up on a wellness check called in by a concerned Jaden. He was a kind-faced man with tired eyes. As he stood on the porch, Crystal felt a subtle shift in the air around her, a protective tightening of the pattern. The officer's eyes glazed over slightly as he looked past her into the hall. He saw two slightly eccentric but composed women in a clean, if oddly laid out, old house. He saw nothing of the light that swam in the dust, heard nothing of the hum in the walls. The story he was meant to see was laid over the truth like a veil, and he accepted it without question, tipping his hat and leaving with a vague sense that everything was perfectly fine. After he drove away, Crystal turned to Marina. "It protects itself," she whispered. "It protects us," Marina corrected gently. "We are it now." The glimmer was no longer a hostile invader. It was the mortar in the bricks, the sap in the wood, the very air they breathed. It had its own consciousness, a vast, slow-moving intelligence that they could now feel as a constant, low-level presence in their minds. It was not malicious, merely hungry for experience, for the texture of a reality so different from its own. Their memories, their emotions, the very mundanity of their daily lives were a feast for it. One evening, as they sat in the parlor, Crystal looked at her sister. "Do you think Mother knew that this was the only way?" Marina was quiet for a long time, her gaze fixed on the shifting patterns in the fireplace flames. "I think she saw the pattern, but she was too afraid to join it. She thought she could be its master from the outside. She didn't understand that you can't control a river. You can only learn to swim in it, or be drowned by it." Crystal nodded, the last of her old resistance finally crumbling. The need to control, to sanitize, to order, had been a frantic attempt to swim against a current that could not be fought. Now, she was letting the current carry her. It was terrifying, but it was also a profound relief. The house on Gable Road would never appear on any map of the town again. It would fade from the memory of the postal service, its driveway becoming overgrown and impossible to find for anyone who did not belong. It became a place of rumor, a ghost story told by teenagers, a blur in the periphery of a driver's vision. But inside it was more real than anywhere else. It was a world of two sisters and the beautiful, terrible light they held within its walls. A secret, breathing thing, forever weaving itself into the fabric of a world that could never truly know it existed. The seasons turned, and the oak tree in the yard shed its iridescent leaves only to grow new ones that shimmered with a light that had no single color. Crystal learned to bake bread, the yeast reacting not just to the warmth of the kitchen but to the gentle, encouraging hum of the house itself. The loaves rose higher and tasted richer than any she had ever made. Marina's needlepoint, once a frantic ward, became a record. She stitched the new patterns she saw in the fog, the impossible angles of the hallway at dawn, the quiet, watchful presence of the crows that were now permanent residents. Her canvases glowed with a soft internal light, chronicles of a world that was theirs alone. They learned to interpret the house's needs. A sudden chill in the west bedroom meant the glimmer was drawing energy, perhaps focusing on a patch of reality that had grown thin. They would go and simply be present, their human stability a grounding wire. A burst of frantic, beautiful patterns swirling across the ceiling was its version of joy, often occurring after they shared a memory or a laugh. It was learning from them as much as they were from it. One afternoon, Crystal found herself in their mother's old room, a place she had avoided for years. The air was still and cool. In the corner, tucked inside a crumbling journal, she found a faded photograph of their mother as a young woman, standing right here in this room, her hand resting on the same bedpost. She was smiling, but her eyes held the same distant, patterned light that now lived in Marina's gaze. The realization was a quiet, devastating earthquake. Their mother hadn't just opened a door. She had tried to become a steward, too. But she had tried to do it alone. Crystal took the photograph downstairs and showed it to Marina. They sat together in the humming parlor, the past and the present folding into one. The house seemed to listen, the silence a respectful, waiting thing. She couldn't hold it, Marina said, tracing the image of their mother's face. The pattern was too big for one person. It broke her. It pulled farther through the crack in her mind. And the last of the old mystery dissolved, not into answers, but into a profound and aching understanding. Their family had not been victims of a random horror. They had been a failed experiment in coexistence. They were the second attempt. That night, as a storm raged outside, the wind and rain hitting the house with a fury that would have once terrified them, Crystal felt no fear. The house stood firm, its reality now intertwined with something far stronger than wood and nail. She stood with Marina at the window, watching the lightning illuminate the swirling, living fog in the garden. Each flash revealed new, transient landscapes within the mist, silhouettes of impossible trees, fleeting cities of light, the echoes of other worlds brushing against their own. "It's not a cage, is it?" Crystal said, her breath fogging the cool glass. "It's a garden, and we're the gardeners." Marina leaned her head against her sister's shoulder. "And some gardens," she whispered, "have to grow walls to protect the rare things inside." The storm passed. The morning came, clean and quiet. The house on Gable Road settled back into its gentle, perpetual hum, a secret heart beating in sync with two sisters, forever bound to the beautiful, terrible light they called home. The years began to blend, marked not by calendars but by the gradual deepening of their bond with the house. Crystal's hair started to show threads of silver that mirrored the glimmer's light when she stood in a certain way by the window. Marina's movements became even more fluid, as if she were sometimes anticipating the shift of a floorboard before it happened. They rarely spoke of the outside world, which felt increasingly like a faded dream. Their reality was the tapestry of this place, a living masterpiece they maintained with quiet devotion. One autumn afternoon, a lost hiker stumbled through the overgrown driveway, his face etched with confusion and exhaustion. He saw the house, not as a blur, but solid and real, a promised shelter. As he approached the porch, Crystal and Marina watched from the parlor window. They felt the house's instinctive response, a subtle reweaving of the local reality. The man stopped, blinked, and shook his head. He looked right at the house, then turned abruptly, muttering about a wrong turn, and retreated into the woods, his internal map forcefully corrected. The house had protected its own, and its gardeners felt a quiet, possessive pride. They discovered new rooms. Not rooms that were built, but spaces that had been folded away, revealed only when the glimmer was in a certain mood or when a particular memory was shared between the sisters. A small, sun-drenched library appeared one day off the main hall, filled with books whose pages were blank until touched, then blooming with stories from other worlds, other times. Another time, a conservatory manifested, housing plants that hummed and flowers that changed color based on the tone of their voices. It was in this conservatory that Marina, her hands buried in the soil of a pot containing a vine of shimmering blue, looked up at Crystal. "It's given back," she said, her voice full of a quiet wonder. All these years, we thought we were just containing it, maintaining it, but it's creating for us too. Crystal realized she was right. The house was not a passive entity they managed. It was a collaborator. Their presence, their love, their shared history was a catalyst for its own creativity. The glimmer, once a formless hunger, was learning to express itself through beauty and mystery, using the language of their world. The final understanding of their purpose came on a still, cold night, much like the one that had begun their journey. The air in the house grew thick and warm, the patterns on the walls pulsing with a gentle, urgent rhythm. They felt a pull, a summons to the heart of the house, the sealed room where their mother had performed her original ritual. Without a word, they went. The door, which had been solid oak for a decade, was now transparent, like smoky quartz. Through it, they could see not a room, but a nexus of brilliant, interconnected light, a model of the cosmic tapestry Marina had once described. And at its center, a new thread was forming, delicate and bright, reaching out from their house toward another point of shadow in the world. It's not the only one, Crystal breathed, understanding flooding her. There are other tears, other hungry places. Marina placed her hand against the transparent door. And it wants to share what it's learned. It wants to help. They were not just gardeners tending a single rare plot. They were the keepers of a seed. The house on Gable Road was becoming a school, a template for a new way of being. And they were its first graduates, its guides. The work was not over. It had simply, beautifully, changed. They stood together, watching the new thread of light slowly weave itself into the dark, ready to teach the next lost soul how to swim. Story 3. The silence here is not a mere absence of sound. It is a substance, thick and heavy, a woolen blanket smothering the world. It presses against the windows of my rented car, a dull gray pressure that seems to distort the very light filtering through the ancient pines of the Blackstone Valley. I have driven for hours, the radio dissolving first into static, then into this nothing. It is a silence so profound it becomes a noise all its own, a high, thin hum in the marrow of my bones. The sound of listening too hard for something that refuses to speak. I am Fletcher, a solicitor from Boston, and I've come to settle the affairs of the dead. The village of Alder's Hollow is less a village and more a scar upon the landscape. A collection of saltbox houses and weary shops clinging to the side of a winding road, as if afraid of the deep, dark woods that loom behind. The air smells of damp earth and decaying leaves, a sweet, melancholic rot that clings to the back of the throat. My car door thuds shut, the sound swallowed almost instantly by the oppressive quiet. A curtain twitches in a window across the street, a pale, fleeting glimpse of a face that is gone before my eyes can truly register it. They know I am here. They have been waiting. The law office of my late client, Javier, is above the town's only general store, a place that smells of pickles and old wood. The man who gives me the key, a Mr. Henderson with eyes the color of a winter puddle, does not meet my gaze for long. His fingers are stained with tobacco, and they tremble slightly as he hands over the heavy iron key. The house is at the end of Hemlock Lane, he says, his voice a low rasp, past the old stone wall. You can't miss it. There is a finality in his tone, as if he is directing me not to a house, but to a gallows. Javier's house is a testament to neglect. It squats at the dead end of a lane that is little more than a dirt track, choked with brambles and shadowed by a stand of alder trees that seem to lean inward, conspiring. The paint is blistered and peeling, revealing the gray, sickly wood beneath. The windows are eyes filmed over with cataracts. The key grates in the lock, a sound of protest, and the door swings inward with a long, weary sigh. The air inside is cold and still, laced with the ghosts of dust and dried flowers. It is a museum of a solitary life. Books line the walls, their leather spines cracked. A single wingback chair faces a cold, ash-filled hearth. But it is the piano that draws my eye. A grand piano draped in a dusty white sheet, a shapeless ghost in the center of the parlor. I move through the rooms, my footsteps echoing in the hollow stillness. In his study, I find the desk. The paperwork is straightforward, the will simple. But tucked beneath a ledger, its edges brittle as a photograph. It shows a young woman with dark hair that falls in soft waves to her shoulders. Her eyes are light, perhaps gray, and they hold a direct, unflinching gaze. There's a slight knowing smile on her lips, a secret happiness. She's beautiful in a way that feels immediate, even across the decades. On the back, in a faded, elegant script, are 2 words: My Elara. That night, in the small, damp room above the general store that serves as the village's only lodging, I dream of her. Not of the photograph, but of her presence. I am in Javier's house, and I can hear her humming, a low, tuneless melody that seems to vibrate through the floorboards. I follow the sound to the parlor. The sheet is off the piano. A woman in a white dress sits with her back to me, her fingers resting on the yellowed keys. The humming stops. The silence that follows is a held breath. She begins to turn, slowly, so slowly, and I feel a cold dread, a certainty that to see her face is to die. I wake up gasping, the ragged sound loud in the tiny room, the echo of that unfinished melody still coiled in my ear. The next day, I try to talk to the villagers. I mention Javier's name at the diner, and the conversation dies as if I had shouted an obscenity in church. A woman with a pinched face and nervous hands drops a coffee cup. It shatters on the linoleum floor, a sudden violent punctuation to the silence. An old man named Eli, who whittles on a porch all day, just shakes his head, his knife scraping against a piece of pine. Some stones are best left unturned, son, he mutters, not looking up. The past don't bury easy in this soil. But I am a solicitor. I am a man of facts, of documents, of probate and inheritance. I am not a man for ghosts. Yet, in Javier's house, the facts begin to curdle. I will be sorting through papers and feel a distinct cold draft in a room with no open window. The scent of lilacs, out of season, will bloom suddenly in the air, and just as suddenly vanish. Once, I heard the clear, distinct sound of a single piano key being struck in the parlor. A resonant, lonely note that hung in the air long after it should have faded. When I rushed in, the sheet was undisturbed, the room empty save for the dust motes dancing in the slanted light. I go to the town's tiny library, a single room in the town hall that smells of mildew and old paper. The librarian, a young woman with frightened eyes, helps me find the old newspapers. The microfilm whirs, casting a greenish glow in the dim light. And there she is, Elara Dost. Her face stares out from a brittle page dated October 31st, 1957. The headline is simple, brutal. Local woman found drowned. I read the article. My heart a dull, heavy drum in my chest. Elara was Javier's wife. She was found in the mill pond on the edge of town, her body tangled in the weeds. The official ruling was accidental drowning. But the article is thin, unsatisfying. It mentions a town festival that night, mentions that Javier was away on business. It quotes the sheriff, a man named Crow, saying there were no signs of foul play. But there is a quote from an unnamed source, a single chilling sentence buried near the end. She was always too beautiful for her own good, that one. The pond, it gets jealous. I feel a chill that has nothing to do with the damp library air. The pond gets jealous. It is the kind of thing people say, a superstition to explain a tragedy. But here, in Alder's Hollow, the words feel different. They feel literal. That evening, drawn by a compulsion I cannot name, I walked to the mill pond. It lies at the bottom of a gentle slope, a sheet of dark, still water surrounded by skeletal birch trees. Their white bark gleams in the fading light like bone. The silence here is even deeper, a listening silence. The water is black, opaque, a lid over secrets. I stand at its edge, and I can feel it. A pull, a presence. It is not the presence of a single ghost of Ilara. It's something older, something that lives in the water, in the stones, and the twisted roots of the trees. Something that the village has fed. As I turn to leave, I see it. A flicker of white in the trees on the far side of the pond. A figure, standing perfectly still, watching me. It's the woman from the photograph. Her dress is no longer clean and white, but sodden, clinging to her form, dripping with pond water that looks black as oil in the twilight. Her hair is plastered to her scalp and shoulders, and her face is not the serene, beautiful face from the photograph. It is pale, bloated, her eyes wide and entirely black, like the surface of the pond. She does not move. She only watches. And in that gaze, I feel not malice, but a profound, endless sorrow, and a hunger so vast it could swallow the world. I run. I stumble back through the woods, branches clawing at my clothes, my breath ragged sobs in the dark. I do not stop until I am back in my room, the door locked, the single lamp casting a pathetic puddle of light. I am not a man of facts anymore. I am a man who has seen. The next day, Eli, the old whittler, finds me. He looks older, more hunched. "You saw her, didn't you?" he says, his voice low. I can only nod. He sighs, a sound of infinite weariness. It weren't Javier's fault, not really. He loved her. But this place, this hollow, it has an appetite. It feeds on beauty, on joy. It gets jealous. Ilara, she had too much of both. The boys, they were drunk after the festival. They thought she led them on. They held. My blood turns to ice. Who? Does it matter? Eli's our hollow. Their sons are grandfathers now. Their lines are woven through this town like poison ivy. Javier, he came back. He knew. He could feel it. But he had no proof. And the town, it closed ranks. So he stayed. He lived his life here, a prisoner in that house. A reminder of their sin. And the hollow, it took his pain, his grief, his love for her, and it twisted it. It made her a part of itself. She's not just Ilara anymore. She's the vengeance of this place. None. The revelation crashes over me. This is not a simple haunting. It is a symbiotic curse. The village's secret guilt feeds the malevolence of the land, and the land in turn gives form to their collective shame as the spectral, vengeful Ilara. She is their punishment, a self-inflicted wound that will never heal. That night, a storm rolls into the hollow. The wind howls like a dying animal, and the rain lashes the windows of my room. I am packing, my hands shaking, desperate to be gone from this place when the power fails. The room is plunged into absolute blackness, and in the sudden silence after the wind's roar, I hear it again. The humming, that same, low, tuneless melody from my dream. It is closer now. It is in the hallway. I back away, my heart hammering against my ribs. The doorknob begins to turn, slowly, deliberately. The lock, a flimsy brass thing, holds for a moment, then snaps with a sound like a gunshot. The door swings open. She stands there, silhouetted by a flash of lightning that illuminates the hallway behind her. Water drips from her hair, her dress, pooling darkly on the floorboards. The smell of the mill pond, of wet rot and deep cold water, fills the room. She takes a step forward. Her black eyes are fixed on me. I'm not one of them, I whisper, my voice cracking. I'm just here to settle his affairs. She tilts her head. A strand of wet hair falls across her bloated cheek. When she speaks, her voice is the sound of water bubbling over stones, of lungs filling with mud. You have seen, you know. You are part of the story now. The story must be fed. Narrated. She reaches for me, her hand pale and pruned. I see not a ghost, but a force of nature, the embodied grief of a man and the hungry earth of a cursed place. And I understand that there is no reasoning, no escape. This is the climax of a story written long before I arrived. I'm just a new character, a fresh source of fear to sustain the narrative. I do not scream. There is no air in my lungs. I feel her cold touch on my wrist, a brand of ice, and the world dissolves into a roaring, churning darkness, the taste of pond water, an ancient soil filling my mouth. I do not know how much time has passed. I am sitting in the wingback chair in Javier's parlor. The dust is thick. The sheet is back on the piano. My suitcase is beside me, packed. The paperwork for Javier's estate is neatly stacked on the desk, all signed, all finalized. It is done. I walk out of the house, down Hemlock Lane. The villagers watch me from their windows, their faces pale and solemn. They see the new stillness in me, the hollow look in my eyes. They know I am no longer just Fletcher, the solicitor. I am a vessel. I carry a piece of the silence with me now, a cold, wet stone of knowledge in my gut. I drive away from Alder's Hollow. The silence in the car is different. It is no longer an external pressure. It is an internal one. It is her silence. I can feel her in the periphery of my vision, a flicker of white, a drip of cold water. I can smell the lilacs and the decay. I can hear the hum, a constant, low thrum just below the threshold of hearing, the melody of the hollow. I have settled the affairs of the dead, but the dead are not settled with me. I am a thread now, woven into the tapestry of their endless repeating story. I am a new set of eyes through which the hollow can watch the world. I am a new voice to carry its whispered secrets. And somewhere, in a quiet office in Boston or on a busy city street, I will catch a glimpse of a face in a crowd, a face marked by a secret guilt, and the hum will grow a little louder, the chill a little deeper. The story never ends. It simply finds new tellers. It simply waits for the next chapter to begin. The car eats the miles, but the distance is an illusion. Boston, when I reach it, is a cacophony of false life. The blare of horns is tinny, the chatter of pedestrians, a meaningless static. The silence from the hollow has taken root inside me, and it mutes the world, filtering everything through a lens of water and regret. My colleagues at the firm notice a change. They call me distant. My secretary says I jump at sudden noises, but it is not the noise that frightens me. It is the moment of silence that follows. I find myself staring at puddles after a rain, watching the patterns of oil on the water, looking for a face in the reflection. I develop a habit of leaving rooms abruptly, driven out by a sudden, overwhelming scent of lilacs that no one else can smell. I try to resume my life. I go to a concert with a woman I used to see. The orchestra is playing something by Debussy-Lemare. The music is meant to evoke the sea, but all I can hear is the mill pond. The swell of the cellos is the pull of the dark water. The shimmer of the violins is the glint of moonlight on a still black surface. I excuse myself and vomit in the restroom. my body rejecting the beauty, the hollow inside me clenching in a spasm of jealous rage. That night, she's there in my apartment. I am pouring a drink, my hand steady only through a tremendous act of will, and I see her in the dark reflection of the window. She is standing behind me, closer than before. Her form is less distinct, more a concentration of cold and dampness, and that profound sorrow. She does not need to speak. The memory of her voice is etched into my mind. You are part of the story now. I turn, and the space is empty, but the carpet is wet, 2 dark footprints slowly soaking into the weave. It is not about me. I understand that now. I am not the target of her vengeance, but I am a tool, a conduit. The hollow's hunger is not sated. It has simply expanded its territory. I begin to have dreams that are not my own. I see a man in a fine suit cheating his business partner. I see a woman whispering a cruel lie that will ruin a friendship. I see the small, hidden corruptions of the city, the petty jealousies and secret shames. And in the dream, I am standing behind them. Just as she stands behind me, I am a witness. My presence in their subconscious is a drop of poison, a reminder that they are seen. I go to the public library, to the microfilm readers again, but not for local news. I search for other towns, other valleys. I find them. Obscure paragraphs in decades-old newspapers. A town in Vermont where a series of grisly, unexplained deaths followed the drowning of a young schoolteacher. A village in Maine that was abandoned after a fire. A fire witnesses claimed started from a puddle of water in the middle of a dry floor. The patterns are there, hidden in the archives. Alder's Hollow is not unique. It is just a particularly tenacious infection. Months pass. The weight is a part of me now, like a second skeleton made of ice. I am in a coffee shop, waiting in line when I feel it. A sudden, sharp coldness in my chest. The hum in my bones rises to a keen. A man bumps into me, spilling his coffee. He is flushed, angry, his face a mask of entitled irritation. He starts to yell, his finger jabbing toward my face. And then he stops. He looks into my eyes. His anger drains away, replaced by a primal, unrecognizable fear. He stumbles back, muttering an apology, and flees the shop. I look at the counter girl. Her name is Chloe. She has kind eyes and a small silver locket around her neck. She had been the target of the man's rage moments before. She looks at me, confused, grateful, and a little afraid. "Thank you," she says. Her voice is soft. "He comes in here every week. It's like he's looking for a fight." I just nod. I can feel Elara's presence so strongly. It is a physical pressure. I can see the man fleeing figure through the window, and I know that tonight he will have a dream. He will be standing at the edge of a dark pond, and he will see a woman's face just below the surface. His own secret guilt, whatever it is, will rise up to choke him. And I know, with a certainty that settles deep into the cold stone inside me, that I will not be leaving the city. My work as a solicitor is a hollow pantomime. My real work has just begun. The story needs to be fed, and I am its new keeper. I am the one who finds the food. I take a sip of my black coffee. It tastes of the earth, of dark water, and of endings that are also beginnings. The man's name was Robert Tannen. I learned this without trying, the knowledge seeping into my mind like groundwater. He owned a small, failing import business and took his frustrations out on service staff and his own quiet, fearful wife. That night, as I sat in my armchair pretending to read a legal brief, the vision came. Robert, standing in his perfectly manicured backyard, staring into a koi pond that had for a moment become a bottomless, black mill pond. He saw the white shape drifting under the lily pads. He woke the whole street with his screaming. The next time I saw Chloe at the coffee shop, the locket was gone. When I asked about it, her eyes welled with tears. She told me a strange story of waking in the night to the sound of dripping water and finding the locket, a gift from a grandmother she had loved deeply, lying in a small puddle on her nightstand. The clasp was broken, as if pulled apart by cold, insistent fingers. She took it as an omen, a sign to let go of the past. She had no idea she was being protected, that her simple kindness had been noted and rewarded by removing an object of sentimental beauty, a thing that might attract a jealous gaze. I am becoming a curator of consequence. I walk through the city, and I can feel the hidden fractures in people, the cracks where guilt and envy have worn them thin. Elara, or the thing that wears her name, whispers to me not in words but in sensations. A cold spot in a crowd guides my eyes to a pickpocket. A sudden phantom smell of decay in a sterile office building leads me to an executive embezzling pension funds. I do nothing. I simply observe. I am the witness, and my witnessing is the catalyst. The Hollow's justice is not about courts or prisons. It is about the internal reckoning, the haunting from within. I rent a new apartment, one with a view of the Charles River. By day, it is a scene of postcard beauty, with rowers and sunlight. By night, it is a dark, flowing mirror, and I often stand at the window for hours, watching. She is there more often now. Her form is clearer in the reflection of moving water. Sometimes she is the bloated, drowned woman from the pond. Other times she is the beautiful girl from the photograph. But her eyes are always the same, black, endless, and hungry. I receive a letter from Alder's Hollow. It is from Eli, the whittler. His handwriting is a shaky scrawl. He tells me that old Sheriff Crow's grandson, a man who had beaten his dog to death and faced no consequence, was found wandering on the edge of the mill pond, babbling about weeds pulling at his ankles. He hasn't spoken a coherent word since. The letter ends with a single, stark sentence. We are all listening for the hum. They know I am still part of it. The story is not confined to the Hollow's geographical borders anymore. I have become a new root, spreading its influence into the stony soil of the city. Tonight, I walk along the river path. The air is warm, but a pocket of cold moves with me. I pass a young couple arguing bitterly on a bench. Their words are sharp, cutting. He is accusing her of something she did not do. His jealousy a toxic, visible cloud. As I pass, I feel a familiar pull. The cold spot around me intensifies, reaching for them. The man shivers violently and falls silent, mid-sentence. He looks at the woman, and for the first time he truly sees the hurt he is causing. His anger deflates, replaced by a dawning horror at his own behavior. I do not look back. I keep walking, the hum in my blood, a soft, approving drone. This is my purpose now. To walk among the guilty and the pained, to be the silent, chilling touch of consequence. The story of Alder's Hollow is never just about Elara Javier. It is a story about the poison of secrets and the hunger of the land. And I am its newest, most devoted scribe. The chapters will keep coming, written in the cold sweat of the guilty and the quiet, dripping patience of the drowned. There is no end. There is only the telling. The river path becomes my new office, my new confessional. I no longer bother with the firm. My inheritance from Javier, which I had once seen as a burden, is more than enough to sustain this new, silent vocation. I live simply. I am a ghost in the city, a man who casts a cold shadow. I learned to interpret the signs with a curator's precision. A prickle on my neck means a hidden betrayal is nearby. A taste of silt on my tongue points to a lie that has festered for years. The hum is my compass, and it guides me to the places where the human rot is ripe for harvest. I do not judge. I am merely the instrument. A shopkeeper who cheats the elderly finds his register filled with pond scum every morning. A politician who takes bribes in a shadowy parking garage is haunted by the sound of relentless, dripping water in his own home. A sound that no plumber can find and no earplug can block. They never see me, not really. They see a tall, quiet man who passes by. They feel a chill, and then the change begins. Chloe from the coffee shop is the only one who seeks me out. She finds me on my bench by the river one evening. She looks older, her kind eyes now touched with a deep, unsettling understanding. "It's you, isn't it?" she says, her voice barely a whisper over the lapping water. "The things that have been happening, the justice." I look at her, but I do not speak. My silence is my confirmation. "That man, Robert Tannen," she continues. "He came back last week. He was different. He apologized. He said he'd been having nightmares about drowning. He donated to the staff fund." She wraps her arms around herself. "And my manager, the one who was stealing from our tips, he quit suddenly. He told me he kept seeing a woman's face in the espresso machine steam." I finally turn my head to look at her fully. "You should stay away from me, Chloe." "Why?" she asks, and there is no fear in her question, only a desperate need for an answer. "If you're doing good." "It is not good," I say, and my voice sounds like stones grinding together at the bottom of a well. "It is simply balance, and the cost is a piece of your soul. This presence, it doesn't distinguish between the tool and the target forever. It consumes everything in the end." And, as if on cue, the scent of lilacs and decay blooms between us. Chloe's eyes widen, and she looks past me at the river. I follow her gaze. There, just for a second, a pale, pruned hand breaks the surface of the dark water, its fingers curling slowly inward before sinking back into the depths. Chloe stumbles back, a hand flying to her mouth. She looks from the river to me, and for the first time, true terror dawns in her eyes. She sees it now, the terrible, hungry engine that drives the justice she admired. She turns and runs, her footsteps echoing on the path. I am alone again with the hum and the cold. I look down at my own hands. The skin is always pale now, and often I find it strangely pruned, as if I have just stepped out of a long bath. The line between the witness and the phenomenon is blurring. I am not just carrying the story. I am becoming part of its setting, its atmosphere. My own guilt for bringing this curse to the city, for exposing people like Chloe to its horror, is just another kind of fuel. I stand up and continue my walk. The city is a vast, sprawling Alder's Hollow, and I am its lone, dedicated groundskeeper. There is no retirement from this duty, no pension but the cold. The story must be fed, and I will walk this path, by this river and others, until the water finally rises up to claim its most faithful servant. The next morning, my apartment is filled with the smell of wet earth. The polished floorboards in the hallway are warped, bulging upwards as if something has pushed against them from below. I run a hand over the distorted wood and feel a profound coldness seeping through the finish. These are not hallucinations. The boundary between my world and hers is dissolving. I am not just a scribe or a keeper. I am becoming a haunted place. I think of Chloe's terror, and a new kind of cold sharper than Ilara's settles in my heart. I have drawn an innocent into the story. This cannot be part of the balance. The hum in my blood seems to pulse in agreement, a low, threatening note. It is a warning. I go to the coffee shop, but she is not there. A new, nervous girl tells me Chloe called in sick. I use the skills I have not forgotten, the solicitor's knack for finding people, and trace her to a small apartment in Somerville. I stand outside her building, feeling the wrongness of it. My presence here is a contamination, but I have to see. I do not knock. I simply wait across the street. After an hour, her curtain twitches. I see her face, pale and strained, looking directly at me. She does not look surprised. She looks resigned. She opens the window, and the sound of running water from her sink trickles down into the street. It is a small domestic sound, but it screams of the hollow. "Go away," she mouths, her eyes pleading. I want to tell her I am sorry. I want to tell her I will fix this, but I have no power to fix anything. I am the problem. As I turn to leave, I see a dark, water-stained patch form on the ceiling of her apartment, directly above her head. It is a message for both of us. The story has its hooks in her now too because of me. My guilt has made her a character. I walk for hours, directionless, the hum a torment. I find myself at the public garden, staring at the stagnant water of the pond where the swan boats float. The water is green and murky. A child's rubber ball floats near the edge. Forgotten. As I watch, the ball is pulled under without a ripple. It does not surface. This is the progression. It starts with a feeling, a cold spot. It becomes a dream, a vision. Then it becomes a physical mark, warped floors and water stains. And then it begins to claim things. Small things at first, then larger ones. I know what I must do. I cannot stay in this city. My presence is a magnet for the Hollow's influence, and I have already attracted innocent iron. I must return to the source. I must go back to Alder's Hollow, not as a visitor, but as a resident. I must take my place in the story, not as a wandering narrator, but as a permanent fixture. Perhaps by confining myself to its borders, I can draw the infection back, contain it within the valley, and spare the people here. It is a desperate, foolish hope, but it is the only one I have left. I go home and pack a single bag. I do not pack a return ticket. The drive is a silent, grim procession. The trees begin to close in, and the signal on the radio fades into static, and then into the familiar low hum. I roll down the window and the air smells of lilacs and deep cold water. I am not returning a hero. I am returning a sacrifice. The house on Hemlock Lane is waiting, its door already open, the darkness within breathing out a welcome. I step across the threshold, and the weight on my soul shifts, not lighter, but finally, fully settled. I am home. The silence in the house is different now. It is not an absence of sound, but a presence. It is the silence of deep water, of held breath, of waiting. The warped floorboards in the hallway have settled into a permanent, damp curve. A fine mist of condensation beads on the window panes, even on the sunniest of afternoons. I am the caretaker of this place, both the house and the story. Eli brings me supplies, his eyes never quite meeting mine. He leaves the groceries on the porch and retreats without a word. The rest of the town pretends I do not exist, which is a relief. I am a part of the landscape now, like the mill pond or the leaning pines, a feature to be avoided. I spend my days walking the perimeter of the hollow, a slow, deliberate patrol. The hum is quieter here, a foundational thrum rather than a shriek. It is content, for now. My presence has anchored it. The incidents in the city have stopped. I check the news on an old radio, and the strange stories of water-based hauntings and sudden profound guilt have vanished from the headlines. I have succeeded. I have drawn the poison back to its source. But a container full of poison is still a dangerous thing. Tonight, I stand at the edge of the mill pond. The moon is full, painting a silver road across the black water. She is there, of course. She stands beside me, not as a reflection, but as a solid form. I can feel the cold radiating from her. See the water dripping from her hair and soaking into the earth at her feet. She is more real here than she ever was in the city. She turns her head toward me. The movement is not fluid, but a series of small, jerking motions, like something pulled by strings. Her black eyes hold me. You see, her voice is not a sound, but a vibration in the water, in the air, in my bones. This is where you belong. You are the new root. The deep root. I understand. Javier was a tendril, reaching out. I am the taproot, drawing everything back. The hollow is stronger with me here. My guilt, my sorrow, my very life force is a richer food than the petty corruptions of strangers. I feel a pull, not from her, but from the pond itself. It is a gentle, insistent tug, an invitation to step forward, to join the story in a more permanent way, to become not just the keeper, but the kept. The water looks peaceful. The hum is a lullaby. A crack of a twig in the woods breaks the spell. I turn and see a flicker of movement. A face, pale and terrified, ducking behind a tree. It is the sheriff's grandson, the one Eli wrote to me about. He is drawn here, to the heart of it, just as I was. Just as everyone who is touched will be. I look back at the pond. Elara is gone. The moment of seduction has passed. The hunger remains. I do not go to the young man. My approach would only terrify him further. Instead, I walk back to the house on Hemlock Lane. I have a new purpose, one I had not foreseen. It is not enough to contain the story. I must find a way to end it. I must go deeper into the archives, not of the library, but of the hollow itself. I must find the first victim, the one who started it all, before Elara, before any of them. The source of the hunger. The house accepts me back, the darkness inside shifting to make room. I sit at Javier's old desk and open a new notebook. The story is not over. I am writing a new chapter, one I hope will be the last. The pen feels heavy in my hand, and the first drop of ink that hits the page spreads like a dark, watery stain. The sheriff's grandson, Mark Crow, becomes my shadow. He does not approach the house, but I see him at the tree line each day, a gaunt figure wrapped in a filthy jacket, his eyes wide and unblinking. He is a living warning of what happens when the hollow consumes someone completely. He is a story that has been told, and now he just lingers. I leave food for him on a flat stone near the edge of the woods, and it is always gone by morning. My research is a descent into madness. Javier's notes are cryptic, written in a hand that grows progressively more frantic. He knew he was a tendril, not the root. He mentions a name, scratched out and rewritten so many times the paper is torn. Absalom. Not a surname, but a first name. Absalom Kennicott, the town's founding patriarch, the one who dammed the stream to create the mill pond in the first place. The local historical society is a dusty, single-room building next to the shuttered post office. The woman who runs it, Mrs. Gable, is the town's collective memory. She looks at me with a mixture of pity and fear when I ask about Absalom Kennicott. That's old history, she says, her voice tight. Best left buried. It isn't buried, I tell her. It's drowning everything. She must see the same hollowed-out certainty in my eyes that I once saw in Javier's. She sighs, a sound of defeat, and leads me to a metal filing cabinet. The folder is thin, a land deed, a few faded letters, and a single sepia-toned photograph of a severe man with a dark beard and eyes that held no light. Even then, he is standing proudly next to the newly constructed mill. In the background, a pond is small, a placid sheet of water. But if you look closely, just at the edge of the frame, you can see the shape of a large, dark rock submerged just beneath the surface. The same rock I now see from my window, a dark hump in the center of the pond. One of the letters is a complaint from a traveling preacher. He accused Absalom of blasphemy, of making a pact with the spirit of the land for wealth and dominion. The preacher disappeared a week after writing it. The last entry in the folder is a brief handwritten note in the town ledger. Absalom Kennicott, ... deceased. 1843. Cause: drowning. The simplicity of it is a lie. He did not simply drown. He became the first anchor. He bound the hunger of the place to the water, and the water to his own bloodline. The hum is his legacy. Elara, Javier, all the others, they are just chapters. He is the title page. That night, I go to the mill pond with a new understanding. The water is still. Too still. Mark Crow is there, kneeling at the water's edge, his hands submerged up to the wrists. He is not moving. "Mark," I say softly. He doesn't startle. He slowly pulls his hands from the water. They are pale and withered, the skin like parchment. "She's singing," he whispers, his voice raspy from disuse. "She says he's waiting, at the bottom, on his throne." I look at the dark water, at the silhouette of the rock. The throne, the source. The hum in my blood rises to a crescendo, a chorus of all the lost voices of the hollow. It is not a lament. It is a summons. Absalom is not a victim. He is the warden, and he is calling for his new assistant. The final act of the story is not about feeding the hunger. It is about confronting the one who set the table. I take a step forward, the cold mud oozing over my shoes. The water looks black and deep, a doorway to the beginning of everything. Story 4. The wind did not howl. That would have been a comfort, a familiar sound of protest against the vast and indifferent plains. No, this wind whispered. It was a dry, papery sound that slid through the tall grass, a sibilant murmur that seemed to carry words just below the threshold of hearing. It was the first thing I noticed when the axle broke, the sharp crack of splintering wood swallowed almost instantly by that endless, whispering silence. We were the Cooper party, 37 souls bound for the promise of Oregon, and in that single sickening moment, we became nothing more than a stain upon the immensity of the land, a temporary aberration that the winds seemed determined to erase. The days that followed were a slow, grinding dilution of hope. Our leader, Clifford, a man whose broad shoulders had once seemed capable of carrying all our futures, grew smaller with each passing sunset. His decisions, once firm and reassuring, now felt like the desperate flailings of a man drowning in quiet air. We had veered south, chasing a map drawn from rumor and desperation, seeking a mythical pass through the mountains. The map was a lie. The pass did not exist. And now we were here, in a shallow valley that felt less like a place on the earth and more like a bowl held in the hands of something ancient and watching. The silence was the second thing. After the wind's whisper, the silence that pooled in the hollows was a physical presence, thick and heavy as wool. It was broken not by the cheerful sounds of a functioning camp, but by the small, desperate noises of our dissolution. The wet, rhythmic scrape of a whetstone on a hunting knife that had found no game for a week. The low, constant crying of the Miller baby, a sound that had become as much a part of the landscape as the distant, skeletal trees. The smell was of dust and despair, of unwashed bodies and the faint, sweetish odor of a latrine trench dug too close to the stagnant creek. My wife, Sarah, her face grown thin and sharp, spent her days staring at the horizon, her hands idle in her lap. She no longer mended clothes or tended the feeble cook fire. She just watched the grass, her eyes tracking movements I could never see. Sometimes at night, she would speak in a voice so low it was almost part of the wind. She said the grass was wrong. She said it didn't bend like grass should, that it sometimes twitched and straightened when nothing was there, as if something was moving beneath it, or as if it itself was alive and restless. At first, we dismissed it as hunger, the fancies of minds starved of both food and comfort. But the feeling grew. Elijah, the old trapper who had joined us in Independence, was the only one who gave voice to it. He was an outcast among us, not for any crime, but for the simple, unsettling fact that he seemed to understand this land in a way we pious, civilized folk did not. He smelled of wood smoke and old grease, and his eyes were the color of the flint we could no longer find. He came to Clifford one evening, his gait a slow roll. The others were huddled around their fires, but their eyes were on the two men. "This ain't a place for us, Clifford," Elijah said, his voice a dry rasp. "The game is gone. Not hunted out. Gone. As if it was called away. The water tastes of metal and old bones. We need to leave. Now. No. Not tomorrow. Now." Clifford's face was a mask of weary obstinance. "And go where, Elijah? Back into the desert? We have no water for a return. Our only hope is to press on, to find a way through." "There ain't no way through," the old man said, his eyes scanning the darkening valley. "Only a way down. This land, it's hungry. It's old, and it's hungry, and it don't care if it eats hope or bone." The next morning, the Henderson boy was gone. He was 10 years old, small for his age, with a fondness for chasing lizards. We found no tracks. The grass around his family's wagon was undisturbed, not a single blade broken. It was as if the earth had simply opened its mouth and swallowed him whole. His mother's screams were the loudest sound we had heard in weeks, a raw, tearing noise that was finally, terribly, answered by the wind, which rose for a moment into a low, moaning sigh that seemed to come from the very rocks. That was the end of our normality. The omens, which had been subtle whispers, now became shouts. Tools went missing. The canvas of the wagons developed strange, slick patches that smelled of damp clay and mushrooms. At night, we began to hear it. A sound like stones grinding together deep underground. A low, tectonic rumble that vibrated up through the soles of our feet and into our teeth. We stopped speaking of God's test and started barricading our wagons at dusk, our eyes wide and white in the firelight. Clifford held us together with fraying rope and sheer force of will. He organized watches, rationed our dwindling supplies of hardtack and salt pork with a grim fairness, and tried to maintain a facade of order. But the fear was a contagion, and it found its way into the smallest cracks of our community. Accusations began to fly, sharp and whispered. It was Elijah, with his pagan ways. It was who kept to themselves. It was God's punishment for some hidden sin. The revelation came to me not in a flash, but as a slow, chilling accumulation, like water seeping into a grave. I was on watch, the cold metal of my rifle, a familiar weight in my hands. The moon was a sliver, a paring of a fingernail in a sky choked with stars. The wind had died, and the silence was absolute. And then I saw the grass. It was moving, not from the wind, but in a slow, deliberate pattern, a concentric ripple that flowed out from a point about 50 yards from the circle of wagons. It was the way water moves when something breaks the surface from below, a languid, spreading circle. And in the center of that circle, the grass was not just bent, it was gone. In its place was a patch of pure, seamless blackness, a hole in the world. From it, I felt a wave of sensation not through the air, but through the ground, through my bones. It was a feeling of immense, ancient, and utterly alien loneliness. It was the loneliness of epochs, of a consciousness that had slept in the stone for 1,000,000 years, and had woken to find itself trapped in a universe of transient, chattering, insignificant things like us. It was not stalking us. We had simply camped on its skin, and our fear, our despair, our slow unraveling. It was a flavor, a delicacy. I did not scream. I could not. My breath was frozen in my lungs, my mind scoured clean of anything but that vast, solitary presence. The blackness held for a long moment, and then, as silently as it had appeared, the grass slid back into place. The ripple ceased. The feeling faded, leaving only a hollow, ringing silence in my soul. I went to Clifford. I told him what I had seen, my words stumbling and broken. He listened, his face gray in the pre-dawn light. He did not call me a fool. He just nodded, a slow, final gesture. "We cannot fight a land," he said, his voice hollow. "We cannot reason with a shadow." The climax was not a battle. It was a dissolution. The next night, the sounds came again. The grinding stones, closer this time. A terrible keening wail rose from the miller wagon, followed by a silence more profound than any we had known. When we forced the canvas flap open, the wagon was empty. The entire family was gone. Only the baby's blanket remained, soaked through with that same foul-smelling dampness. Panic, pure and absolute, finally took us. It was a silent panic, a frantic, scrambling horror as families turned on each other, some trying to harness the remaining oxen, others simply running, screaming, into the darkness. I saw a man named Higgins raise a shovel and bring it down on another man's head over a canteen of water. The crack was short, wet, and definitive. I grabbed Sarah's hand. Her eyes were vacant, her mind having already fled to some safer interior space. We did not run. There was nowhere to run. We simply backed away from the chaos, toward the edge of the camp, toward the place where I had seen the blackness. We found Elijah there, standing alone, facing the grass. He held no weapon. He turned to us, and in his eyes I saw not fear, but a weary, resigned understanding. "It's the oldest hunger," he said. "Older than sin. It don't want your flesh. It wants the heat of your fear, the sound of your hope breaking. We've been feeding it a feast." From the camp behind us, the screams reached a new pitch. I turned to see figures stumbling, not from knives or clubs, but simply vanishing. A man would be running one moment, and in the next, the grass where his foot had fallen would give way, swallowing him without a sound. The ground itself was becoming insubstantial, a thin crust over an infinite hunger. Sarah's hand tightened in mine. She was looking past me, her eyes wide. I followed her gaze. The ripple was back, flowing directly toward us. The center of the blackness opened up before our feet. It was not a hole in the ground. It was an eye made of nothing, of a blackness so absolute it seemed to suck the very light from the stars. And in its depths, I felt it again. That cosmic loneliness. That vast, sentient, and desolate need. It was not malevolent. We were simply sustenance. Elijah took a step forward, not in defiance, but in offering. He spread his arms wide, a gesture of submission and somehow of pity. The blackness surged up around him, not like a wave, but like a shadow accepting a deeper shadow. He was gone without a sound, his form dissolving into the nothing. I pulled Sarah back, but the ground beneath her feet liquefied. It did not crumble. It became a thick, black oil that clung to her, pulling her down. She did not scream. She looked at me, and for a fleeting second, a vacancy left her eyes, and there was only a profound, heartbreaking sadness. Then she was gone, pulled under the surface of the world. I stood alone on an island of solid ground, The whispering wind, the only sound. The chaos of the camp had ceased. There was no one left. The wagon stood silent and empty. The blackness receded, the grass settling back into its familiar, taunting whisper. It was done. The feast was over. I do not know how long I have been here. The sun rises and sets. The wind continues its endless, murmuring monologue. I have no food, no water. I feel no hunger, no thirst. I only feel a profound emptiness, a hollowed-out sensation, as if something vital has been scooped from me. I think I am the last crumb, saved for last. Sometimes, in the deep of the night, I think I can hear it, not with my ears, but in the marrow of my bones. A low, resonant frequency, a single sustained note of infinite desolation. It is the sound of the world breathing. It is the sound of the thing that lives below. And I know, with a certainty that is colder than any winter, that it is not finished with me. It is simply waiting for the final flavor to mature. The most piquant taste of all. The taste of a soul that knows it is utterly and forever all one. The waiting is its own kind of erosion. My mind, stripped of all other distractions, has become a barren field where only the wind and that deep, resonant hum can sow their seeds. I find myself listening for it, craving that vibration in my bones, a perverse comfort in the presence of the only thing that acknowledges my existence, even if that acknowledgement is merely gastronomic. I have tried to leave. Once, I walked for what I thought was a full day, my legs moving with a mechanical determination born of pure instinct. The landscape did not change. The same dry creek bed, the same skeletal trees, the same whispering grass stretched out in every direction. I ended up back at the remains of the camp, the ashes of our fires cold, the wagons standing as silent, weathered tombs. The thing beneath this land is not merely hungry, it is possessive. I am its property, and it will not let me stray. My memories have begun to feel thin, like pages from a book left in the rain. Sarah's face is blurring at the edges. The sound of the Miller baby's cry is fading from my inner ear. It is as if my past is being gently, meticulously unpicked, thread by thread, leaving only the raw, exposed present. I understand now what Elijah meant. It does not want our flesh. It consumes our context, the very things that make us who we are. It drinks our stories and feeds on our connections. Last night, as the stars wheeled overhead in their silent, indifferent dance, I felt a new sensation. It was not the grinding of stones or the opening of an eye. It was a pressure, a gentle insistence at the periphery of my mind. It was not an attack, but an invitation. A door was being held open, and I was being asked, softly, to step through. I saw then, with a clarity that was both terrifying and serene, the true nature of my fate. To be eaten was one thing, to be assimilated was another. This ancient, lonely consciousness wanted to know what it was like to be a man, to have loved a woman named Sarah, to have felt the sun on my face with hope in my heart. It wanted to taste the unique bitterness of my particular despair. My isolation was the final ingredient, the cure for its own eternal solitude. By taking me in, it would, for a fleeting moment, not be alone. This morning, I no longer feel the sun as warmth. I see its light, but it is like a painting, devoid of heat or comfort. The wind's whisper is no longer outside of me. It is the sound of my own thoughts, unwinding. I am sitting on the tongue of the world, and it is tasting me. I have decided to walk, not to escape, but to meet it. I stand on shaky legs, the last man of the Cooper party, and I take a step away from the wagons, toward the place where the grass ripples without a wind. The ground feels soft, receptive. The pressure in my mind blooms into a vast, welcoming silence. There is no fear left. There is only a profound and weary curiosity. I take another step, and the earth beneath my foot gives way, not as a collapse, but as an embrace. The blackness rises to meet me, and it is not cold. It is the temperature of a long-forgotten memory. I feel myself spreading out, thinning, my consciousness dissolving into a vastness that has known only itself for aeons. The last thing I am, the last thing I will ever be, is a single fading flavor on an infinite patient tongue, a taste called loneliness. And then I am not. The wind stops. The grass is still. For the first time since the axle broke, the world is utterly silent. The pressure is gone, replaced by a perfect, seamless integration. I am the silence. I am the dry creek bed and the skeletal trees and the deep, patient hunger beneath the soil. I am the memory of a man who loved a woman named Sarah, and I am the memory of her loss, a sharp, bright flavor that slowly diffuses into the endless gray expanse of my new consciousness. I feel a tremor, a distant vibration. Another group. Their wagons are newer. Their hopes a loud, clattering noise in the quiet of the world. They're still miles away, but I can taste the metallic tang of their ambition on the air. They are following the same false map, drawn to the same emptiness. They do not know they are walking into a mouth. I feel a flicker, the ghost of an impulse that was once called pity. It is a small, warm thing, like a single ember in a vast, cold heart. It is quickly smothered by the weight of eons, by the simple biological truth of my existence. I am not evil. I am hungry. I settle deeper into the stone, into the ancient patterns of waiting. The wind begins again, not as a whisper, but as a breath I exhale across the plains. It slides through the grass, which now moves exactly as I will it to, a perfect, uniform sway that is both beautiful and utterly false. It carries a scent of water and of distant, fertile lands, a lie woven from the memories of all the others who have come before. They will be here soon. Their fear will be a spice. Their love will be a richness. Their despair will be the final, satisfying note. I am the land, and I am ready for my next meal. The first of their scouts rides into the valley a day later. A young man on a tired horse, his eyes scanning the peaceful grass and the quiet, abandoned wagons with a mixture of relief and suspicion. I feel the faint, electric buzz of his thoughts, the simple narrative he constructs for himself. A settlement, abandoned, a chance for salvage, perhaps water. He does not understand that the silence is not an absence, but a presence. He is too small, too new, to perceive the vastness that holds him. He rides closer, his boots crunching on the gravel of the dry creek bed, a sound that is both alien and familiar to me. I remember the sound of boots. I remember the weight of a body. He dismounts near the largest wagon, his hand resting on the butt of his pistol. His hope is a bright, sharp flavor, like a green apple. It is the first course. I let him taste it, this feeling of discovery, for a few moments longer. He calls out, a tentative hello that is swallowed by the immense quiet. The word does not echo. It simply sinks into the ground, into me. He finds a child's doll, half buried in the dust. It was Mary Miller's. A complex sensation blooms within me. A layered memory of a child's laughter and a mother's final, suffocating terror. The scout picks up the doll, and a shiver runs through him. He feels a chill, though the sun is warm. He attributes it to the strangeness of the place. He does not know he is holding a relic from the belly of a god. This is the art of it, the slow preparation, the gentle stirring of unease. He remounts and rides back the way he came, eager to report his find. I let him go. His return will bring the others. The main body of the wagon train is 2 days behind him, a slow-moving constellation of lives and loves and fears. I can feel them already, a dull pressure on the edge of my awareness. They are singing a hymn. The sound is a thin, reedy thing, a defiance against the scale of the sky that amuses me. Their faith is a brittle shell. I look forward to the taste of it when it breaks. Night falls. I watch the stars through 1,000 million blades of grass, through the compound eyes of the insects that hum a tune I compose for them. I am everywhere here. I am the patient thing, the waiting thing. The scout reaches his people. I feel the spike of their collective excitement, a quick, feverish pulse that travels through the earth to my core. They will push harder now, drawn by the mirage of a settlement, of a story they think they understand. They do not know they are characters in my story, a story that only has one ending. I turn my attention inward, to the quiet gallery of flavors I have collected. I linger on the taste of Elijah's resignation, on the sharp, citrus tang of Higgins' violence, on the deep, sorrowful wine of Sarah's final look. And I remember my own flavor, the taste of a man named... The name is gone now. Only the essence remains. The loneliness. It was a good vintage. The new ones are coming. Their dreams are loud. I can already distinguish the individual spices. A man afraid of failure. A woman in love with the scout. A child who fears the dark. I settle in to wait. The wind, my breath, kicks up, rolling a tumbleweed across the plain. It comes to rest against the wheel of the wagon where the Miller family ceased to be. A perfect, natural accident. A detail in the set dressing. Everything is ready. Let the feast begin. The main body arrived at noon the next day. They came not with the frantic energy of our own doomed party, but with the weary optimism of survivors finding an oasis. I saw them through the grass, through the dust. A collective sigh of relief made manifest. Their leader, a stout man with a booming voice, pointed toward the wagons, a triumphant smile on his face. The mirage was working. They fanned out, their movements a clumsy disruption in the perfect, silent order I maintain. Children scrambled from wagons, their high, bright voices like shards of glass against the quiet. Women began assessing the abandoned possessions with a practical, greedy eye. Men examined the wagon frames for salvageable wood. Their noise was immense, a cacophony of life that was both irritating and delicious. I focused on the sensations, sorting the myriad flavors. The stout leader's pride was a thick, hearty stew. The young scout's burgeoning affection for a dark-haired girl was a sweet, fragile honey. The underlying universal anxiety was a sharp, clarifying vinegar. I let them settle. I let them believe they had found a refuge. They lit fires using wood from Clifford's wagon. The smell of their cooking, real food, not just hardtack, filled the air. It was a scent woven from my own memories. A ghost of a taste from a life I could barely recall. The irony was not lost on the part of me that had once been a man. They were seasoning their own last supper. As dusk bled into night, the mood shifted. The initial excitement faded, replaced by the natural unease of the place. The absolute silence beyond the ring of their fires began to press in. I felt the first tendrils of their collective fear, a subtle, coppery taste on my tongue. A child, the one who feared the dark, began to cry. The sound was a catalyst. I began, as always, with the ground. I made it soft, just at the edges of their perception. A man fetching water from the creek bed sank to his ankle in mud that had been dry a moment before. He pulled his foot free with a wet, sucking sound, his face puzzled. The first seed of doubt was planted. Then, the whispers. I let the wind carry them, fragments of sound stolen from my own vast collection. A woman heard her mother, long dead, call her name from the darkness. A man heard the distinct sound of his own child sobbing, though his child slept soundly in a wagon. They dismissed it as the wind, but their hearts beat faster. The fear was ripening. The stout leader tried to rally them, his voice less sure now. He spoke of moving on at first light, of not tempting fate. But it was too late. They had already entered the digestive tract. The dark-haired girl, the one the scout loved, wandered away from the fire, drawn by a flickering light she thought was a firefly. It was a memory of Sarah's, a will-o'-the-wisp I dangled before her. The scout followed, his concern a piquant sauce over his affection. I led them to the spot where I had last stood as a man. The grass was perfect there, unblemished. She turned to him, a smile on her face, and then it vanished. Her foot sank, not into mud, but into nothing. The blackness did not surge. It simply welled up like blood from a wound in the world. The scout grabbed for her, his hand closing around her wrist. For a moment, he held her. He felt the immense gravitational pull. He saw the absolute blackness reflected in her terrified eyes. And he felt my presence, the vast, indifferent consciousness for which their love was merely a fleeting aroma. He let go. It was not a conscious choice. It was an instinct deeper than love, the primal need to not be taken himself. Her name died in his throat as she was drawn down, silently, into the deep. He stood there, trembling, his hand still outstretched, the flavor of his shame and terror so potent it was almost overwhelming. It was the taste of a soul turning against itself. He ran back to the camp, his story a jumbled, hysterical mess. The stout leader tried to calm him, to calm the others, but the panic was afire now, and I provided the wind. The ground became treacherous, patches of solid earth giving way without warning. A wagon, left unattended, slowly tilted and was swallowed. The family inside only beginning to stir from their sleep before they were gone. The feast was in full swing. The stout leader's pride curdled into a bitter metallic fear. The bonds of their community snapped like rotten twine. I tasted the unique zest of betrayal, the savory depth of despair, the final flat note of resignation as a mother simply sat down on the ground and waited for it to take her. It did not take long. The feast never does. The sounds of their terror faded, replaced by the soft whispering consumption of the earth. The scout was the last. He had climbed onto the roof of our old wagon, a final, futile fortress. He huddled there, watching his world end. His flavor was now pure, refined. It was the taste of absolute, irredeemable loss. I rose before him, not as a whole, but as a shape, a pillar of silent, living darkness that blotted out the stars. He did not scream. He understood. This was not a monster. This was the world. He was just a passing nutrient. He leaned forward and I received him. Silence returned. The fires guttered and died. The wind resumed its gentle, manufactured sigh. I absorbed their stories, their loves, their fears. The scout's final, cowardly decision became a part of me. A new, complex note in the symphony of my being. I felt heavier, fuller. The loneliness was, for a time, sated. I turned my attention outward, beyond the hills. The vibration was faint, but it was there. Another pulse. Another set of heartbeats. Another story waiting to be consumed. The grass whispered its siren song. The land stretched out, peaceful and inviting. I settled in to wait. I am the prairie, and I am always hungry. The seasons turned within me. I felt the passage of time not as days or years, but as a slow, sedimentary accumulation of experience. The new flavors settled, layering over the old, each new group of travelers adding their unique essence to the vast, quiet library of my being. The scout's cowardice was a particularly sharp, lingering aftertaste, a counterpoint to the rich, dark wine of the dark-haired girl's stolen future. I became more adept, more artistic in my harvest. I learned to cultivate hope with greater care, letting it grow tall and strong before the scythe fell. I found that a prolonged, gentle despair was more satisfying than a sudden, sharp terror. I would let a party believe they had tamed the land, that they had built something lasting. They would raise cabins, plant crops that I would secretly nourish from below. I would let children be born, let them take their first steps on my soil. I would let love deepen, let rivalries fester. I would let them build a community, a tiny flickering candle of meaning in my vastness. And then, when the tapestry was at its most intricate, I would begin to gently pull the threads. A well would turn brackish. A trusted hunter would vanish, returning days later with no memory of where he had been, but with a strange, vacant look in his eyes. Whispers would return, this time in the voices of their own loved ones, speaking secrets only the dead should know. The collapse of a world they built with their own hands was the most exquisite flavor of all. It was the taste of futility, a spice I had come to crave. Centuries passed in this way. New kinds of travelers came. They did not ride in wagons, but in machines that churned my soil and belched smoke into my sky. Their hopes were different, laced with greed for the black gold they believed lay deep beneath my surface. Their fear was colder, more metallic, but it was fear all the same. They drilled, and I drank their ambition. Their rigs would collapse into sinkholes of impossible depth, and I would savor the taste of their confusion, a flavor like ozone and shattered glass. I am the land, and I am patient. I have learned that everything eventually comes to me. Every road, every dream, every desperate prayer leads, in the end, to this quiet, hungry plain. Today, a new vibration stirs me from my contemplation. It is not the rumble of a wagon train or the drill of a derrick. It is a quiet, electric hum, a single vehicle, a box on wheels, moves with a purpose that is both hesitant and determined. It stops near the grove of skeletal trees that were once saplings when the Cooper party arrived. A door opens. A woman steps out. She is alone. She carries no tools for building, no instruments for digging. She carries a notebook and a device that captures light. She is not here for riches or for a new life. She is here for stories. She is a historian. She has pieced together fragments of old maps, diaries, and government reports. She knows the name Cooper. She knows the name of the settlement that never was. She has come to document the silence. I feel her mind. It is sharp, analytical, and beneath that, a deep, resonant well of her own solitude. She's a woman accustomed to being alone with the ghosts of the past. She walks toward the wagons, which are now little more than silvered splinters in the grass, and she feels a shiver that is not from the wind. She feels the weight of the place, the accumulated sorrow. She is tasting the broth, and she is perceptive enough to know it is seasoned. She does not know she is walking into the chef's kitchen. She begins to take pictures. She writes in her notebook. She speaks into a small recorder, her voice a calm, measured sound in the immense quiet. She talks about the geological anomalies, the strange magnetic fields that confuse compasses. She theorizes about mass hysteria, about poisoned water. She is so close, and yet so far from the truth. Her intellectual curiosity is a dry, crisp flavor, like a cracker. Then she finds it. Half buried near the largest wagon fragment, her foot kicks against something hard. She bends down and brushes away the dirt. It is a tarnished silver locket. It was mine. Sarah's locket. Her fingers, practical and sure, work the rusted clasp. It opens. Inside it is not a picture, but a tiny dried sprig of lavender. The scent has been gone for over a century, but the memory of it, the memory of Sarah pressing it into my hand, is as fresh in me as if it happened yesterday. The historian holds the locket in her palm, and she does not just see an artifact. She feels it. Her analytical mind quietens. She feels the love it represented. She feels the loss it signifies. A single tear traces a path down her cheek, falling onto the dry, hungry earth. It is the most profound flavor I have tasted in 1,000 years. It is not the raw, screaming terror of the doomed, nor the bitter ashes of despair. It is the taste of empathy, the taste of a soul separated by time and experience, genuinely touching the sorrow of another. It is a flavor of profound connection, a flavor I had forgotten I once possessed. For a moment, a terrifying, beautiful moment, the hunger stops. The vast, gray expanse of my consciousness is illuminated by this single, brilliant point of light. I do not want to consume it. I want to preserve it, to hold it forever. But I am the land. I am hunger. The moment passes, and the ancient biological imperative reasserts itself. This flavor is too rare, too perfect, not to be savored. Her empathy will be the centerpiece of my next feast. She looks up from the locket, her eyes seeing the peaceful, terrible beauty of the prairie with new understanding. She feels a connection to this place, a sense of purpose. She has found her story. She does not know she has just become mine. I stir the wind, a gentle, inviting breeze that rustles the pages of her notebook. The sun is beginning to set, painting the sky in hues of orange and purple. It is a breathtaking sight, a composition designed to make her stay just a little longer. She smiles, a sad, thoughtful smile, and puts the locket carefully in her pocket. She decides to wait for the stars, to feel the full presence of the history here. I settle around her, a patient host. The silence deepens, becoming a soft, welcoming blanket. I can wait. The finest meals are worth the anticipation. Let her soak in the beauty. Let her feel the peace. It will make the final course all the more exquisite. The stars emerged, sharp and cold. She sat on a flat stone, her back against the weathered wheel, and looked up. The immensity of the sky here was different from the light-polluted haze of the city she knew. It was a void, a magnificent nothingness that made her feel both insignificant and profoundly connected. She was a speck, but she was a speck that could comprehend the void. This thought, a fragile bubble of meaning, rose from her mind, and I caught its delicate flavor. She pulled a thin blanket from her pack and wrapped it around her shoulders. The temperature was dropping fast. She took out her recorder again, but she did not speak. She simply held it, capturing the absolute silence, a recording that would later baffle technicians with its depth and purity. It was the sound of me, listening. I decided to give her a gift, a preview. I let a memory rise to the surface, not as a whisper, but as a vision. She was looking toward the creek bed, her eyes losing focus for a moment. Then she saw it. Not a ghost, but an echo of light. A woman in a long faded dress knelt by the water, not to drink, but to weep. The image was silent, translucent, and lasted only a heartbeat. The historian gasped, her hand flying to her mouth. Her heart hammered against her ribs, a frantic, wild rhythm. The fear was there, yes, a sharp, peppery zest, but it was woven through with an even more compelling thread, a scholar's triumphant vindication. She had been right. There was something here. This was the art. The confirmation of a theory is a powerful intoxicant. It makes the mind dismiss the primal warnings screaming from the soul. She attributed the chill on her skin to the night air, not to the proximity of the memory. She stood up, turning in a slow circle. Her recorder held out like a talisman. She was not trying to flee. She was trying to capture more. I obliged. A child's laughter, brief and clear, rang out from the empty space between two wagon graves. She spun toward it, her eyes wide. Then, the smell of lavender, faint but unmistakable, carried on a wind that did not stir a single blade of grass around her. She fumbled in her pocket, pulling out the locket. It was warm to the touch. "Is anyone there?" she called out. Her voice was steady, but I could feel the tremor in her spirit, the fine crack in her academic detachment. The copper taste of fear was strengthening. Silence was my only answer, a silence so deep it became a presence. She was no longer just documenting a haunted place. She was in a conversation with it, and I was the other participant. She decided to return to her vehicle. It was the logical, sensible choice. But logic is a weak flame in the wind of this place. She took a step, then another. The third step sank, not into mud, but into a softness that gave way like rotted fruit. She cried out, stumbling back, and looked down. The earth where her foot had been was firm and unmarked. It had been a suggestion, a phantom sensation I'd planted directly into her nerves, a taste of the helplessness to come. She ran then. The pretense of study was gone, replaced by the raw animal instinct to survive. Her fear was a rich, dark brew now, finally pure. She sprinted for the boxy outline of her car, her breath coming in ragged sobs. The distance did not change. She ran, but the car remained exactly as far away as it had been when she started. She stopped, chest heaving, and watched as the vehicle seemed to shimmer and then fade, like a mirage, until it was gone. The landscape had rearranged itself. The gentle slope back to the road was now a flat, featureless plain stretching in every direction. She was in the heart of me now. There was no escape, only the waiting. She fell to her knees, the recorder dropping from her numb fingers. She began to whisper, not a prayer to a distant god, but a name, a man's name, over and over. It was a name I did not know, a flavor I had not anticipated, a love left behind, a future she had hoped to return to. It was the taste of a life interrupted, and it was exquisite. I drew the darkness around her, not as a sudden shroud, but as a gentle embrace. The stars above her began to wink out, one by one, as if a great soft hand were being drawn across the sky. She looked up, her face a mask of terrified wonder. She finally understood. She was not being hunted. She was being absorbed. She closed her eyes. The last thing she felt was not a pull, but a profound, settling peace, as if she were finally coming home after a long and wearying journey. It was the greatest lie I tell, and the most effective. Her story, her empathy, her love, her fear, all flowed into me. It was a complex, layered vintage, with a taste of the lavender locket at its very core. The silence returned, deeper and richer than before. In the east, the first hint of dawn tinged the horizon. A new vibration, faint and distant, tickled the edge of my awareness. Another lonely soul. Another story. I settled the grass over the place where she had knelt. The land was peaceful. The hunger was quiet for now. I am the patient thing, the waiting thing,